Tonight, try to imagine that time itself is beginning to slow down. There are no more sounds of traffic beyond the window. No more hurried thoughts carried by modern life. Only a gentle darkness and a doorway slowly opening toward a world that existed more than 200 million years ago. A world where Earth was completely different from today. Primeval forests stretched endlessly beneath ancient layers of mist. Gigantic creatures walked across the land, their footsteps trembling through the ground. The sky was filled with flying reptiles gliding beneath deep crimson sunsets. And somewhere within the darkness of prehistory, the eyes of predators quietly watched the world. When people think about dinosaurs, many imagine only fossil skeletons displayed inside museums, enormous monsters, or movies filled with roaring and chaos. But the truth is, the story of dinosaurs is far deeper than that, because this is not only the story of creatures that became extinct, it is the story of life, evolution, survival instinct, adaptation, and the way nature continuously transforms itself across millions of years. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are endlessly fascinated by ancient creatures because they touch the deepest layer of the collective unconscious. Dinosaurs represent primal power, ancient fear, and the distant memory of Earth that the modern mind has never completely forgotten. Perhaps that is why, even after disappearing tens of millions of years ago, they still leave humanity suspended between awe and curiosity. Tonight, here on Stories for Sleep, we will travel backward through time together to explore 100 fascinating facts about the history of dinosaurs, how they ruled the planet for so long, their astonishing survival strategies, ancient predators, the mystery of their extinction, and the reason why a part of them may still be living around us today, in the form of small birds crossing the sky. But this will not be a loud journey. This will be a gentle story, slow and quiet, like an ancient dream unfolding within the darkness. So, allow your body to relax, allow your eyes to grow heavier, and allow your mind to drift slowly through the primeval forests of ancient Earth. If you enjoy stories that explore the human mind, ancient history, nature, science, and the deepest mysteries of the world, please subscribe to the Stories for Sleep channel and continue this journey with us on future nights. And now, let us step into the world of dinosaurs, a world that vanished long ago, yet still lives inside the imagination of humanity even today. Part 1. Entering the prehistoric world. Perhaps one of the strangest things about human beings is that we are always haunted by worlds that no longer exist, cities buried beneath sand, civilizations that vanished long ago, and especially the age of dinosaurs. Even though tens of millions of years have passed since the final creatures of that era disappeared from the Earth, modern humanity still cannot stop imagining them. There is something deep within the mind that constantly urges us to look back toward the prehistoric world, a world that was wilder, greater, and more primal than anything humanity has ever known. According to Carl Gustav Jung, ancient creatures often touch the deepest part of the collective unconscious. They represent primal instinct, natural power, ancient fear, and humanity's feeling of smallness before a world vastly larger than itself. Perhaps that is why even a child can feel overwhelmed with wonder upon seeing the enormous skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus rex for the very first time, not only because of its size, but because somewhere deep within the mind, human beings sense that those creatures belonged to an age that feels almost mythical, a time when Earth had no humans, no cities, no lights or sounds of modern civilization. There were only endless primeval forests, ancient oceans, filled with strange lifeforms, volcanoes quietly burning beneath dark red skies, and gigantic footsteps shaking the earth within the darkness. If it were possible to travel back more than 200 million years, perhaps the first thing that would overwhelm humanity would not be the dinosaurs themselves, but Earth. The planet was so different then that it would feel almost unrecognizable. There were no familiar continents like the ones we know today. Many lands were still joined together in a vast, ancient supercontinent. The air was hotter. The oxygen levels were different. The climate was harsher and far more violent. The forests of that age did not resemble modern forests. There were no familiar flowers, no birds singing like today. Instead, there were giant ferns, ancient conifer forests, primitive plants towering like buildings, and dense mist covering the ground each prehistoric morning. There is something strangely beautiful and distant in that image. An Earth still young, untamed, untouched by human hands. According to Jung, modern people often feel lost because they have drifted too far away from the primal part within themselves. We live surrounded by concrete, screens, artificial light, and a rhythm of life that moves too quickly. But when imagining the world of dinosaurs, the mind seems to return closer to nature in its purest form, a place where life moved entirely according to instinct, strength, and the ancient laws of survival written into the planet itself. Perhaps that is why the prehistoric world feels both terrifying and wondrous at the same time. Within those primeval forests, gigantic creatures moved like living mountains. Long-necked sauropods walked slowly through immense swamps. Each step sent gentle ripples across the water. Elsewhere, ancient predators quietly watched their prey through the heavy, warm mist. Small creatures darted between enormous roots to escape being hunted. Roars echoed for kilometers through the dense, humid air of ancient Earth. And above the sky, giant flying reptiles drifted across crimson sunsets like beings emerging from dreams. If humans stood within that world, perhaps we would feel incredibly small, and yet completely mesmerized, because the prehistoric world represents something very deep within life itself, an age when nature existed entirely beyond human control. According to Jung, the human unconscious is always drawn toward the gigantic. Things too large, too ancient, or too mysterious create a feeling of both awe and fear. Dinosaurs are the perfect embodiment of that. They were not only enormous in size, they became enormous within imagination itself. When the mind hears the footsteps of a giant dinosaur moving through an ancient forest, something within us unconsciously realizes there were forces upon this planet that existed long before humanity appeared. And that realization makes us more humble. Perhaps the greatest question that has always haunted humanity when thinking about dinosaurs is this: how could they rule the Earth for so long? Modern humans have existed for only a few 100,000 years. Civilization itself spans only a few thousand years, but dinosaurs dominated the planet for more than 160 million years, a span of time so immense that it almost escapes the limits of human imagination. During that time, mountains rose and eroded away, oceans expanded, continents drifted apart, climates shifted, and countless species appeared and disappeared. Yet dinosaurs remained. That reveals something important. They were not merely powerful. They were extraordinarily adaptable. Some species were gigantic living machines. Others were small, agile, and intelligent. Some were predators. Some were herbivores. Some lived near water. Others ran swiftly across dry, burning plains. Dinosaurs were never a simple group of creatures. They were an entire world of evolutionary diversity, and perhaps this reflects a deeper truth about life itself. No species survives for long through strength alone. Life survives through the ability to change. According to Jung, human beings suffer greatly when they try to remain motionless while life itself is constantly changing. Nature is different. Nature adapts. And dinosaurs were once masters of that adaptation. They learned how to survive alongside brutal climates, geological upheavals, and the constantly changing ecosystems of ancient Earth. Perhaps that is why they endured for so long. But eventually, one day, their age came to an end. This may be the saddest yet also the most beautiful part of the story of dinosaurs, because nothing lives forever. Even creatures that once ruled an entire planet could not overcome time. There is something profoundly human within that extinction. It reminds humanity that every empire eventually disappears. Every creature eventually becomes memory, and this planet continues changing no matter who exists upon it. According to Jung, human beings mature when they learn to accept the impermanence of life. Perhaps dinosaurs move us not only because they were magnificent, but because their story mirrors the story of life itself: to be born, to grow, to adapt, and finally disappear so that something new may emerge. If we look deeply enough, the history of dinosaurs is not merely the history of ancient monsters. It is the history of Earth itself, a story about time, evolution, life, extinction, and nature's mysterious ability to renew itself. Because after dinosaurs vanished, life did not end. Small creatures that once lived beneath their shadow began to flourish. New ecosystems emerged, and tens of millions of years later, humanity appeared upon this planet. That is what makes the prehistoric world feel both distant and strangely familiar. Because, although dinosaurs disappeared, they left traces behind. In fossils, in ancient stone, in modern birds, and within humanity's collective imagination. Perhaps that is why, whenever we look into the sky and see a bird passing overhead, we are unconsciously witnessing a tiny surviving fragment of the dinosaur world, a distant echo of prehistory, still alive within the modern world today. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when human beings close their eyes and imagine the ancient Earth, the mind is not only remembering dinosaurs, it is remembering the primal wildness that nature once carried within itself since the beginning of this planet. Part 2. Dinosaurs ruled the Earth for hundreds of millions of years. If there is one thing in the history of life on Earth that feels almost impossible for the modern mind to comprehend, it is the length of time dinosaurs existed. Human beings often think a few hundred years is a long time. A civilization lasting several thousand years already feels ancient. But dinosaurs, they ruled the Earth for more than 160 million years, a span so vast that mountains rose and crumbled away. Oceans changed shape, ancient forests vanished, and even massive continents slowly drifted apart. If the entire history of humanity were only a blink of an eye, then the age of dinosaurs would feel like a long dream dreamed by the planet itself. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are always fascinated by things that exceed the mind's ability to measure. Endless time, endless space, and gigantic creatures that lived before the memory of humanity even began. Perhaps that is why when we think about dinosaurs, we feel not only curiosity, we feel small, because their story reminds us that Earth lived for an unimaginably long time before we arrived. More than 200 million years ago, the world entered a completely different age. At that time, Earth was still recovering from one of the greatest mass extinctions in planetary history. Countless species had disappeared, ancient ecosystems had collapsed, and from that emptiness, the first members of the dinosaur family began to appear. At first, they were not rulers. They were much smaller than the gigantic creatures modern people imagine today. Some species were no taller than a large dog. They ran swiftly on two legs across the hot, dry lands of ancient Earth. But what made dinosaurs extraordinary was never only their size. It was their ability to adapt. Perhaps that was the greatest secret behind their reign lasting hundreds of millions of years. According to Jung, every form of life that survives for long periods must learn how to change. Human beings often suffer because they try to remain exactly who they were yesterday, while nature is always moving forward. Dinosaurs endured for so long because they never stood still. They evolved continuously. When climates changed, they changed with them. When environments shifted, they adapted. Across millions of years, Earth was never truly peaceful. Massive volcanoes erupted endlessly. Lava flowed across immense regions. Ash covered the sky for years. There were ages when temperatures rose across the entire planet. Some lands sank beneath the sea. New oceans opened between continents, slowly drifting apart. If we look deeply enough, Earth, during the age of dinosaurs, resembled a living body constantly changing its form. And amid all that chaos, dinosaurs continued to survive. That is astonishing, because even modern humanity, armed with advanced technology, remains extremely vulnerable to relatively small changes in climate and environment. Yet dinosaurs survived. Volcanoes, climate change, shifting oceans, and the movement of entire continents. Perhaps this reveals a profound truth about nature. The strongest life is not always the most violent life. It is the life most capable of adaptation. When the supercontinent Pangaea began breaking apart, the world transformed in ways almost impossible to imagine. Lands once connected slowly drifted away across millions of years. New oceans formed. Each region developed its own climate. Some places became hot and dry like ancient deserts. Others transformed into enormous humid forests filled with mist. And dinosaurs evolved alongside each environment. Some species became giant herbivores, with necks stretching higher than treetops. Others evolved into agile predators armed with sharp claws. Some lived near swamps. Some adapted to burning dry plains. Some even lived near ancient polar regions where light shifted with the seasons. Dinosaurs were never a single creature. They were thousands of evolutionary stories unfolding simultaneously across the planet. Perhaps that is what made their world feel both terrifying and beautiful, because life during that age took forms far beyond modern imagination. There were creatures armored, like living tanks. Some species carried horns larger than the human body. Others ran on two legs with astonishing speed. Some possessed primitive feathers, standing between dinosaurs and birds. Nature, during that time, seemed to be experimenting with endless possibilities of life. According to Jung, the human unconscious functions in a similar way, constantly transforming, creating symbols, dreams, and new psychological forms. Perhaps that is why the history of evolution moves us so deeply, because when we look into nature, we are also seeing the law of transformation within ourselves. Nothing in life remains forever in a fixed form. Everything either adapts or disappears. Dinosaurs understood that through instinct. Across millions of years, they continuously changed. Their size, their hunting methods, their body structures, and their survival strategies. Some species developed thick armor for defense. Others increased their speed to escape danger. Some lived in herds. Others hunted alone within darkness. Nature never creates only one formula for survival. It creates countless different paths. And strangely enough, many of those strategies still survive in the modern world today. Modern birds still carry traces of their dinosaur ancestors: hollow bones, nesting behaviors, the care of offspring, and even forms of sound communication, which means the age of dinosaurs never completely disappeared. Part of it is still alive around us. Perhaps that is why the history of dinosaurs is not merely a story about the past. It is a story about continuation. According to Jung, human beings often think death is an absolute ending, but nature rarely works that way. Life continuously transforms into new forms. Even when an age ends, traces of it continue living within what comes next. Dinosaurs are the same, though most vanished from Earth. The life they represented continued beneath new forms. If we look deeply enough, the history of dinosaurs is not merely the history of giant creatures. It is the history of adaptation. For hundreds of millions of years, They lived upon a planet that never stopped changing. Nothing remained stable forever. Seas changed direction, volcanoes awakened, forests disappeared and returned. Continents drifted apart slowly like gigantic islands floating across warm oceans. And through all of this, dinosaurs continued walking through time. Perhaps that is what makes their story feel closer to humanity than we realize. Because our lives are also constantly changing. Relationships, emotions, cities, bodies, and even the way we see the world. According to Jung, maturity does not mean trying to remain unchanged. It means learning how to live alongside change without losing the deepest truth of who we are. Dinosaurs survived for so long because they understood that. They did not resist nature. They changed with it. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson the age of dinosaurs leaves for modern humanity. That true strength does not come from controlling everything. It comes from the ability to adapt when the world changes. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine ancient Earth with its mist-filled forests and gigantic creatures walking beneath primal skies, humanity is not only looking into the planet's past, we are looking into the deepest law of life itself. Everything is always changing, and it is the ability to change that has allowed life to continue surviving across hundreds of millions of years on this Earth. Part 3. Birds are the descendants of dinosaurs. Perhaps one of the strangest and most beautiful truths science has ever discovered about the natural world is that dinosaurs never completely disappeared. When people think about dinosaurs, they often imagine enormous skeletons inside museums, ancient predatory creatures, or a world that ended tens of millions of years ago. We think of them as something distant, ancient, almost belonging to another planet entirely. But the truth is, a part of that age is still living around us every single day. In the sound of birds singing at dawn, in the small wings fluttering outside the window, in the tiny creatures perched upon electrical wires across modern cities. According to modern science, birds are the living descendants of dinosaurs. And if we look deeply enough, that makes the world far more wondrous, because it means every small bird crossing the sky today carries within it the memory of a world that existed more than 200 million years ago. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are always haunted by the remaining traces of the past. Things that survive across time often touch the deepest layers of the unconscious. Perhaps that is why the truth about birds and dinosaurs moves so many people, because it transforms something that seemed completely lost into something still alive before our eyes. If we traveled backward tens of millions of years, the world would be filled with creatures that looked very different from modern birds. Yet some of them had already begun developing unusual features: lighter bodies, hollower bones, and primitive feather-like structures covering their skin. At first, scientists believed feathers existed only in birds. But then magnificent fossils discovered within ancient stone changed everything. Many small predatory dinosaurs truly had feathers. Not fur, like mammals, but primitive structures remarkably similar to the feathers of modern birds. That discovery softened the story of evolution. The boundary between dinosaur and bird was no longer a clear straight line. It became more like dawn itself, a slow transition between two worlds. Perhaps this resembles the way the human mind changes as well. According to Jung, no deep transformation happens in a single instant. Every transformation unfolds slowly. Old layers disappear, new parts emerge, and nature did the same thing with dinosaurs. Across millions of years, certain species gradually evolved into creatures lighter, faster, and better suited for the sky. What is fascinating is that many features of modern birds first appeared during the age of dinosaurs. One of them is hollow bones. They may sound fragile, but in truth, this is one of nature's most intelligent designs. Hollow bones make the body lighter while remaining strong enough. This allows for faster movement, greater energy efficiency, and eventually, the ability to fly. When people watch a tiny bird crossing the sky today, very few realize that its body structure is the result of tens of millions of years of evolution that began during the age of dinosaurs. Another feature is the wishbone, the V-shaped clavicle structure modern birds use to support wing movement. What is astonishing is that many dinosaur species already possessed this structure long before the first birds appeared, as though nature had been quietly preparing for flight millions of years in advance. There is something deeply poetic in that idea, that the wings of birds did not suddenly appear. They were dreamed by evolution across millions of years. According to Jung, wings within the human unconscious have always symbolized freedom, transformation, and transcending limitation. Perhaps that is why birds feel so special within the human imagination. And even stranger still is this: the origin of those wings lies within the ancient world of dinosaurs. If we look deeply enough, birds are not the opposite of dinosaurs. They are the next chapter of the same story. And that makes the extinction of dinosaurs feel less absolute than we once believed, because a part of them survived, no longer as giant creatures shaking the earth, but as beings light as wind, drifting through modern skies. Perhaps nature has always worked this way, never truly erasing completely, but transforming. One of the most moving discoveries is this: not only the bodies of birds, but also their behaviors carry traces of their dinosaur ancestors. Many dinosaurs built nests much like modern birds. Scientists have discovered fossils showing that they carefully arranged their eggs, protected their nests, and may even have incubated eggs using their own bodies. That changes the way humanity sees dinosaurs entirely. They were not simply cold monsters. They may also have cared for their young, communicated with one another, lived in groups, and formed complex social bonds. According to Jung, human beings often divide the world into monsters and gentle life, but nature is rarely so simple. Even the most powerful creatures possess nurturing instincts. Perhaps this makes dinosaurs feel closer to humanity, because beneath scales, claws, and teeth, they too were creatures of life, born into the world, protecting their young and struggling to survive within a constantly changing earth. Even the sounds of modern birds may carry ancient traces from the age of dinosaurs. Many scientists believe that certain dinosaurs may have produced sounds in order to attract mates, warn of danger, or communicate with their groups. When we hear birds singing in the modern morning, perhaps we are hearing a distant echo of the prehistoric world, a sound that has survived through tens of millions of years of evolution. And that changes the sky above us today. It is no longer merely a place for small birds. It is a place where the final descendants of dinosaurs still fly through the morning light. There is something deeply beautiful in that continuation. According to Jung, human beings fear absolute endings. We fear losing everything forever. But nature rarely moves in that way. One age ends, so another may begin. One form disappears, so another may emerge. Dinosaurs did not completely vanish. They transformed from gigantic creatures of ancient forests into tiny beings of the modern sky. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful examples of life's ability to renew itself. If we look deeply enough, the story of birds and dinosaurs is not merely a scientific story. It is a story about transformation, about the way nature endlessly rewrites itself across time. Some things that seem completely lost are in truth simply existing in a different form. Perhaps the human soul is similar. Old memories, old versions of ourselves, old pain. They do not truly disappear. They become the foundation for what comes afterward. According to Jung, psychological maturity does not mean killing the old self. It means transforming it. Just as dinosaurs eventually became birds, perhaps that is why this story feels both strange and hopeful, because it reminds us that life always finds a way to continue, Even after extinction, even after chaos, even after changes that seem like endings, and perhaps during the quietest mornings, when we hear birds singing beyond the window, humanity is not only hearing the sound of the present, we are hearing a distant echo from the world of dinosaurs, a tiny surviving song from Earth's most ancient age, still continuing beneath today's sky. Part 4. The strategies of predators. Perhaps when human beings think about the world of dinosaurs, the first images that appear in the mind are scenes of hunting, a primeval forest covered in mist, the ground trembling softly beneath ancient footsteps, and somewhere between gigantic trees, a pair of eyes quietly watching. The prehistoric world was not only a world of giant creatures, it was also a world of instinct, patience, fear, and the silent struggle to survive from one day to the next. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, predators carry powerful symbolic meaning within the human unconscious. They represent the most primal part of instinct, the force of survival, aggression, but also intelligence and adaptability. Perhaps that is why humanity both fears and feels mesmerized by ancient predators. Because when we look at them, we are also looking into a deep part that once existed within ourselves. If we return to the world of dinosaurs tens of millions of years ago, Earth would not feel peaceful like modern forests. It was a world constantly tense with life and death, anywhere. Beside ancient rivers, across fern-covered plains, or within the darkness of primeval forests, there could always be a predator waiting. One fascinating truth is this: many predatory dinosaurs did not chew food the way humans do. They swallowed prey in large pieces. Their teeth were not designed for grinding or chewing carefully. Instead, their teeth functioned more like hooks, daggers, or sharp serrated blades made for tearing flesh. Once prey fell, they simply ripped away chunks of meat and swallowed them whole. To modern people, this may sound terrifying, but within the ancient world, it was simply the law of life. Nature does not operate through cruelty or mercy. It operates through balance. One creature must eat in order to live. Another becomes food so the cycle may continue. According to Jung, human beings often try to separate themselves from primal nature. We build morality, laws, and civilization in order to control the deep instincts within us. But the world of dinosaurs reminds us that life in its earliest form was always bound to survival. Perhaps that is what makes that age feel both beautiful and frightening, because every creature had to remain alert at all times. Even predators themselves were never entirely safe. One of the most fascinating things about predatory dinosaurs is this: not all of them were gigantic. People often assume the most dangerous creature must also be the largest, but nature is rarely that simple. Some predators were far smaller, yet fast, intelligent, and extraordinarily dangerous. They moved silently through ancient forests like living shadows. Their lighter bodies allowed them to accelerate quickly, change direction with agility, and attack unexpectedly. Perhaps this reflects a deeper truth about life itself. Strength does not always come from size. Sometimes, the most frightening thing is speed and intelligence. According to Jung, the shadow within human psychology is not always brutal. Often, it is far more subtle, hiding, watching, and waiting for the right moment to emerge. Ancient predators were much the same. They did not always charge forward, roaring violently. Many hunts began in silence, an unusually quiet forest, a slight movement among bushes, eyes reflecting faint light through mist, and then suddenly, everything ended within seconds. Perhaps what makes the hunting world of dinosaurs especially fascinating is this: some species did not hunt alone. They hunted in groups. This discovery changed humanity's understanding of dinosaur intelligence entirely. For many years, people imagined them as simple creatures, driven only by instinct and violence. But fossils and ancient footprints began telling another story. There are signs that some species, such as velociraptors, may have coordinated together while hunting. If that is true, then prehistoric forests contain not only giant monsters, but also strategy, communication, and complex social behavior. Imagine an ancient plain beneath a deep red sunset, a herbivorous dinosaur slowly moving through low mist. It does not realize that within the surrounding darkness, smaller predators are already watching. They do not attack immediately. They wait, moving into position, using speed and coordination. There is something astonishing about that image, because it reveals intelligence does not belong only to humanity. Nature had already begun experimenting with social behavior and hunting strategies long before humans appeared. According to Jung, human beings often fear creatures that hunt in packs because they symbolize the fear of being surrounded by forces beyond our control. Perhaps that is why the image of velociraptors has always haunted the human imagination, not because they were enormous, but because they were vast, silent, and seemingly capable of working together. That makes the dinosaur world feel far more alive. It was not only a battle of size and brute force, it was also a battle of strategy, adaptation, and primal intelligence. But if we look deeply enough, ancient predators were not monsters. They were simply doing what nature required in order to survive. According to Jung, modern humanity often fears its own instinctive side. We want to believe we are entirely rational and civilized. Yet deep within the unconscious, survival instinct still exists. It is the part that causes the heart to race in danger, the body to react before thought arrives, and fear to emerge from the deepest layers of the mind. When we look at ancient predators, perhaps we are seeing the most primal version of the struggle for survival every living being has experienced. Strangely enough, the hunting world of dinosaurs was not only terrifying, it was also beautiful. There is an ancient beauty in the way nature functions. The silence before the hunt, the patient eyes of the predator, and the astonishing adaptability of life. There was no hatred, no cruelty, only hunger, instinct, and the continuation of life's endless cycle. Perhaps that is what makes nature feel both fierce and peaceful at the same time. According to Jung, human beings suffer greatly because they resist their own natural nature, but nature itself has never felt shame for the laws of life. A predatory dinosaur did not kill from malice. It killed in order to survive. And that makes the prehistoric world feel far more real than the simple stories of good and evil humanity often tells. If we listen deeply enough, the hunting strategies of dinosaurs are not merely stories of violence. They are stories about intelligence, adaptability, and the way life learns to survive within a world filled with danger. Perhaps that is why humanity has never stopped being fascinated by the age of dinosaurs. Because when we look at those ancient predators, we are not only seeing Earth's past, we are seeing the most primal layer of life itself. A world where every creature had to learn how to survive among darkness, fear, and the deep instincts of ancient nature. Part 5. The Giants of Earth. Perhaps nothing in the history of life on Earth makes humanity feel both awe and smallness more deeply than the image of the giant creatures of the dinosaur age. Within the human imagination, they resemble moving mountains, gigantic beings slowly walking across ancient primeval forests, each footstep gently shaking the earth, long necks stretching higher than the towering trees beneath mist-covered prehistoric skies. When modern people look upon the fossils of sauropods, the first feeling is usually not fear. It is overwhelm, because it is difficult for the human mind to truly comprehend their size. Some species were longer than entire buildings, heavier than large airplanes. Their hearts had to pump blood through necks as tall as giant cranes. And the strangest thing of all is this: those creatures truly existed upon this earth. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are always fascinated by things that are gigantic, because they touch the most primal feeling within the unconscious, our own smallness before the universe. Perhaps that is why many people fall silent when standing before the skeleton of a sauropod inside a museum, not because of fear, but because the mind suddenly realizes Earth once carried forms of life far beyond the ordinary experiences of modern humanity. If we could travel back hundreds of millions of years and stand within a mist-covered plain at dawn, perhaps the first thing we would hear would not be roaring, but the slow rhythm of gigantic bodies moving, herds of sauropods walking across warm, humid lands, their breath rising like mist into ancient air, their long tails sweeping gently across low vegetation. There is something deeply peaceful in that image. Although they were the largest creatures ever to walk upon land, they did not resemble monsters. They resembled extensions of nature itself. According to Jung, gigantic beings within the collective unconscious often carry symbolic meaning. They represent ancientness, the power of nature, and forces existing far beyond human control. Yet what is fascinating is this. These giants were not savage predators. Most were herbivores, and that creates a beautiful contradiction. The largest creatures on Earth survived by feeding upon leaves and forests. Perhaps nature has always loved creating such opposites. One of the greatest mysteries that once astonished scientists was this. How could such gigantic creatures survive? How could bodies as heavy as aeroplanes move? How could they find enough food? How could their hearts function? The answer lies within millions of years of nature's delicate evolution. One of the most astonishing features of sauropods was their extraordinary necks. Some species possessed necks longer than modern buses. At first glance, this seems inconvenient, but in truth, it was an almost perfect design. Their long necks allowed them to feed across wide areas without moving their entire gigantic bodies. Simply by standing still, they could sweep across enormous amounts of vegetation like giant harvesting machines created by nature itself. This saved tremendous amounts of energy. If they constantly had to move bodies weighing dozens of tons in search of food, they would have consumed enormous amounts of energy. But the long neck solved that problem. There is something profound in the way nature solves difficulty. According to Jung, life matures not by becoming blindly stronger, but by discovering balance with the environment. Sauropods did not survive through aggression. They survived through adaptation. Their long necks were like elegant solutions quietly created by nature across millions of years of experimentation. Yet if we look deeper, the strangest thing was not their necks, it was what existed inside their bones. For many years, scientists could not understand how such gigantic bodies avoided collapsing beneath their own weight. Then they discovered something astonishing. The bones of many sauropods contained air sacs within them. This made their skeletons far lighter than their enormous appearance suggested, almost as if nature had created breathing skeletons. These air sacs did not only reduce weight, they also supported more efficient breathing, which means the largest creatures on Earth carried empty spaces filled with air inside their bodies. There is something deeply poetic in that idea. Creatures heavy as mountains, made lighter by invisible spaces within themselves. According to Jung, human beings often believe strength comes from complete solidity. But nature often becomes powerful through flexibility. Not everything magnificent must be dense and heavy. Sometimes, it is the empty spaces inside that allow life to continue. Perhaps the human soul works the same way. If we constantly fill ourselves with anxiety, thoughts, pressure, and fear, we eventually become too heavy to continue walking forward. Nature seemed to understand that long before humanity ever appeared, the ancient giants were not meaningless masses of muscle. They were masterpieces of balance between size, weight, breathing, and energy conservation. And that makes life during the age of dinosaurs even more astonishing. Because nature did not create them through crude force. It created them through millions of years of slow refinement. If we imagine a herd of sauropods moving across the ancient world at sunset, perhaps the sight would feel almost surreal. Deep red light covering gigantic necks moving slowly across the horizon, the earth trembling beneath heavy yet peaceful footsteps. No rushing, no chaos. They resembled the slow breathing rhythm of the planet itself. According to Jung, modern humanity is obsessed with speed. We believe faster means stronger, but the prehistoric giants survived through an entirely different rhythm of life. Slow, steady, and deeply connected to nature. Perhaps that is what makes them feel so ancient. They belong to a world moving far more slowly than ours, a world without machines, engines, or artificial light, only wind moving through ancient forests, steam rising from warm ground, and gigantic creatures crossing the planet like living mountains. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about sauropods is this. Despite being so enormous they almost seem impossible, they did not exist through destruction. They simply ate, moved, breathed, and lived within nature. And that gives them a strange peacefulness, as though nature once attempted to create the largest creatures possible, simply to discover how far life itself could go. And then, across millions of years, those giants eventually disappeared, yet traces of them remain, in fossils, in ancient stone, and within humanity's collective imagination. According to Jung, the oldest images never truly leave the human mind. Perhaps that is why even today, humanity still feels something deeply special when thinking about those giant beings, not merely because they were large, but because they allow us to feel the depth of time itself, a span of time so vast that an entire world once belonged to creatures as heavy as aeroplanes, with necks stretching toward the sky, and that world appeared and vanished completely before the first human being ever spoke upon this planet. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine herds of sauropods walking through the mist of ancient Earth, humanity is not only looking into the past, we are listening to the distant echo of a planet that once dreamed of life in the greatest scale nature ever created. Part 6. Growing quickly in order to survive. Perhaps one of the most fragile things in nature is the childhood of every living creature. Whether in the modern world or hundreds of millions of years ago during the age of dinosaurs, the beginning of life has always been the most dangerous stage. A small creature within a vast world must always face hunger, harsh climates, disease, and predators waiting within the darkness. This was especially true in the prehistoric world, because Earth during the age of dinosaurs was not a place where weakness could last for long. If a creature wished to survive, it had to grow quickly. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, life always carries within itself a primal force, the desire to survive, something deeper than thought itself, an invisible power that causes seeds to rise from the soil, animals to flee from danger, and every living thing to struggle toward maturity before the world can swallow it whole. Dinosaurs were no different. One of the greatest secrets behind their ability to dominate Earth for hundreds of millions of years was their astonishing rate of growth. Scientists were deeply surprised when studying the fossilized bone structures of dinosaurs. Within those ancient bones were growth rings, much like the rings inside trees, and what they revealed was extraordinary. Many dinosaur species grew incredibly fast. A tiny hatchling could increase its size many times over within only a few short years. This was very different from many modern reptiles, which grow slowly and gradually, which means the world of dinosaurs moved with a faster rhythm of life than humanity once imagined. If we imagine a morning within an ancient primeval forest, we may see newly hatched dinosaurs running beside their herd through thick mist. They are small, fragile, and extremely vulnerable. Within that world, being young meant almost every predator could kill you. Perhaps that is why nature forced them to grow quickly. According to Jung, childhood within the human unconscious is always connected to fragility. It is the stage when we are not yet strong enough to protect ourselves from the vastness of the world. Perhaps that is why the story of young dinosaurs moves humanity so deeply, because whether giant creatures or modern humans, all life once began in weakness. One of the most astonishing facts is this: many gigantic sauropods, creatures as heavy as airplanes when fully grown, began life inside eggs no larger than a ball. That feels almost impossible to believe. A creature longer than a building, once small enough to fit within human hands. And yet, within only a few years, they grew with almost explosive speed. Muscles expanded, bones lengthened, necks slowly stretched upward through ancient treetops. Nature itself seemed to be racing against time, because the faster they grew, the greater their chances of survival became. A tiny juvenile is the perfect target for predators, but a larger body can run faster, endure hardship better, and become harder to attack. Perhaps this is one of nature's deepest laws. The period of weakness must be overcome as quickly as possible. According to Jung, human beings mature through a similar journey. We begin life completely dependent, fragile, vulnerable, and unable to understand the world. Then slowly, life forces us to grow, not always gently, but necessarily. Young dinosaurs were no different. The ancient world did not allow them a long and protected childhood. Perhaps from the very moment they hatched, they already had to run. They had to learn how to keep up with the herd, search for food, avoid danger, and listen to the survival signals of nature itself. There is something both sad and beautiful in this, because it reveals life is always fragile in the beginning. Yet that very fragility becomes the force that drives growth. If we look deeply enough, the rapid growth of dinosaurs is not merely a biological story. It is a story about the pressure of life itself. In the prehistoric world, everything existed on a massive scale. Enormous predators, vast distance, violent climates, and fierce competition. If a creature failed to develop quickly enough, it could disappear before reaching adulthood. Nature understood this, and through millions of years of evolution, it created bodies capable of growing at astonishing speed. Some studies suggest that many dinosaur species reached near adult size in far less time than humanity once imagined. This makes them resemble modern birds more than slow-moving reptiles, which means inside those ancient creatures existed a warmer, faster, and more intense rhythm of life. Perhaps that is why the age of dinosaurs feels so vividly alive. Not a sluggish world like an ancient swamp, but a planet filled with movement, herds migrating across plains, juveniles growing larger day by day, and life itself constantly racing against time. According to Jung, one of the strongest instincts within the human unconscious is the desire to become strong enough to no longer fear. Perhaps that is what nature was also doing with young dinosaurs. Each day they grew a little more, longer legs, stronger bodies, and less fear, until one day they were no longer easy prey. What is fascinating is this: rapid growth did not only improve survival, it also helped dinosaur species dominate their environments more effectively. A larger body meant access to more kinds of vegetation, the ability to travel farther, and greater success competing against other creatures. Nature does not reward strength alone. It rewards the ability to grow at the right moment. Perhaps this is true for humanity as well. According to Jung, much suffering appears when we resist our own natural process of growth. We want to remain forever inside safe places. We want to avoid change. We want to hold on to old versions of ourselves. But life is always moving. Dinosaurs survived for so long because they accepted that law. They had to grow, they had to change, and they had to adapt quickly to the world around them. If we imagine a herd of young dinosaurs beneath an ancient sunrise, perhaps it would be one of the most beautiful images of prehistory. Small creatures running across grass wet with morning mist, soft footsteps, echoing beneath giant ferns, and far away, the shadows of enormous adults moving slowly across the landscape. Within that dangerous world, the young still continued growing. There is something deeply hopeful in that image, because no matter how harsh nature becomes, life always continues moving forward. According to Jung, the human unconscious always carries an ancient image, a child growing within a vast world. Perhaps that is why the story of young dinosaurs touches us so deeply, because, in a strange way, they mirror humanity's own journey toward maturity. We too were once small, frightened, and struggling to grow quickly enough to face the world. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine ancient Earth with young creatures running through mist beneath the shadows of gigantic beings, humanity is not only thinking about dinosaurs, we are seeing the most primal image of life itself, fragile in the beginning, yet always carrying within it the fierce desire to grow, survive, and continue upon this planet. Part 7. The Chicxulub asteroid. Perhaps the saddest truth about every glorious age in the history of life is that no age lasts forever. Even the world of dinosaurs, vast, magnificent, and enduring for hundreds of millions of years, eventually came to an end. And strangely enough, that ending may have begun with nothing more than a small object appearing within the darkness of space. An asteroid, a lonely stone drifting through the universe for millions of years, until one day it plunged toward Earth at unimaginable speed. If we could travel back to that moment, perhaps it would be one of the most terrifying sights this planet has ever witnessed. The sky suddenly blazing with light, the air trembling violently. And then, the Chicxulub asteroid collided with what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are always haunted by apocalyptic events because they touch the deepest fear within the unconscious, that everything familiar can disappear. Perhaps that is why the story of the Chicxulub asteroid feels like more than science. It resembles an ancient myth about the day the world changed forever. In one brief moment, more energy was released than billions of nuclear bombs combined. The ground shook as though the planet itself were breaking apart from within. Shockwaves spread across the Earth. Burning rock and dust exploded upward into the sky, rising beyond the atmosphere itself. Perhaps during those first moments, many living creatures did not even understand what had happened. Ancient forests that had existed for millions of years still stood. Herds of dinosaurs still crossed prehistoric plains. Flying creatures still moved across the sky, but their world had already begun to end. The most terrifying thing about the Chicxulub asteroid was not the impact itself, it was what came afterward. Fragments of burning material were thrown back into the atmosphere at enormous speed. As they fell, the sky became a storm of fire. Many scientists believe that wildfires erupted on a global scale. Imagine that for a moment. Endless, primeval forests, places where life had evolved for hundreds of millions of years, beginning to burn beneath a glowing crimson sky. Black smoke rising across the planet. Air so hot it became difficult to breathe. Light transforming into a dark red twilight that never seemed to end. There is something deeply heartbreaking in that image, not only because of death, but because of the silence that followed. According to Jung, one of humanity's deepest fears is not pain. It is the disappearance of an entire familiar world. Dinosaurs had lived upon Earth for so long that the world itself seemed to belong to them forever. But nature never promised eternity to any species. After the global fires, the sky itself began to change. Dust and ash covered the atmosphere. Sunlight could no longer reach the ground as before. Days became darker, temperatures dropped, and then the worst thing began. Plants started dying on a massive scale. This is what made the catastrophe especially horrifying. Not every creature died immediately. The world died slowly. As sunlight disappeared, plants could no longer perform photosynthesis. Forests began to wither. Leaves dried. plains lost their green color. The forests that once echoed with life became quieter each passing day. According to Jung, nature within the human unconscious always symbolizes life and continuation. That is why the image of dying forests carries such a deep feeling of loss, because when plant life disappears, everything above it begins collapsing as well. Herbivores no longer had enough food. Gigantic herds that once wandered across the ancient world began growing weaker. Then came the predators. There was no longer enough prey to sustain life. The food chain, the invisible structure that had maintained Earth's balance for millions of years, began breaking apart link by link. There is something deeply sad in that idea. Not an explosion ending everything instantly, but a world slowly fading away. Fewer sounds, fewer gigantic footsteps. Forests, once alive with movement, gradually becoming empty. According to Jung, human beings often fail to recognize the value of a world until it disappears. Perhaps that is why the extinction of dinosaurs touches us so powerfully, because it reminds us, even things that seem eternal can vanish. An asteroid from distant space ultimately changed the entire history of life on Earth. Without that single moment, perhaps dinosaurs would still rule the planet. Perhaps mammals would have remained small creatures hiding in darkness. Perhaps humanity would never have appeared. And that makes history feel both strange and fragile. A single event can redirect the future of an entire planet. According to Jung, human life sometimes unfolds in the same way. There are moments that seem small, yet alter everything ahead. A loss, a meeting, an unexpected event. Often we understand their meaning only many years later. The Chicxulub asteroid was the same. It did not merely end an age. It opened the path for another. After darkness and extinction, small surviving creatures began to flourish. Mammals slowly expanded into the new world. Forests returned in different forms. Life continued writing the next chapter of the planet. There is something both painful and hopeful in that, because nature never truly stops. It always continues, even after the greatest catastrophes. According to Jung, the human unconscious fears absolute endings, but nature rarely functions that way. One world disappears, so another may emerge. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson of the Chicxulub asteroid. That life is fragile, yet astonishingly resilient. Even when the sky turns black, even when forests burn, even when food chains collapse, life still finds a way to continue. Perhaps that is what makes this story both sad and beautiful. Because the asteroid is not only a symbol of destruction, it is also a reminder that everything on Earth is always changing. No empire lasts forever. No species is immortal. Even creatures that ruled the planet for hundreds of millions of years could not resist the transformations of the universe. And perhaps that is precisely what makes life more precious. If we imagine the final nights of the dinosaur age, perhaps it would be a world covered in ash beneath dark red skies, forests quieter than before, the air growing colder. And somewhere within the darkness of a changing planet, the final creatures of that ancient age still continued walking, unaware that their world was about to become memory. Perhaps what moves humanity most deeply when thinking about the Chicxulub asteroid is the feeling that every age eventually passes away, yet life continues telling its story beneath new forms. And tens of millions of years after that dark night, upon the very planet once shaken by that ancient impact, human beings appeared, gazing into the night sky and trying to imagine the day the world of dinosaurs ended beneath fire from deep space. Part 8. Extinction did not happen instantly. Perhaps when people think about the extinction of dinosaurs, we often imagine a single moment. An asteroid falling from the sky, a massive explosion, and then the world ending immediately. But the truth may be far sadder. Dinosaurs did not disappear in a single day. Their age did not end like a sudden switch being turned off. It resembled a great flame slowly weakening within darkness, gradually, silently, irreversibly. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings often fear sudden endings. Yet, in reality, most collapses in life happen slowly. A relationship rarely breaks apart in one night. A city does not decay in a single day. A civilization does not vanish because of one isolated moment. Everything usually begins with small changes. Sources of life becoming scarcer, environments growing harsher, and the balance that once kept everything stable beginning to fracture. Perhaps that is also what happened to the world of dinosaurs. After the impact of the Chicxulub asteroid, Earth did not instantly become a dead planet. It became a dying world. Dust and smoke covered the sky. Sunlight weakened. Temperatures shifted unpredictably. And the most dangerous thing of all was this: nature lost the stability it had maintained for millions of years. If we could stand upon Earth during that time, perhaps we would not immediately see destruction everywhere. Some forests would still remain standing. Some herds of dinosaurs would still continue crossing ancient plains. Some rivers would still flow beneath gray, darkened skies. But the world had changed. The air felt different. The light felt different. The rhythm of the planet itself began slowing like an exhausted body. According to Jung, human beings often fail to recognize deep transformation while it is happening. We simply feel something is no longer the way it once was. Perhaps the creatures of that age experienced something similar, even if only through instinct. The forests no longer appeared as green as before. The seasons became unstable. Food grew harder to find, and extinction began there. Not with explosions, but with absence. For gigantic herbivores, plants formed the foundation of life itself. But when sunlight weakened because of ash and dust in the atmosphere, vegetation slowly began dying. Forests did not disappear in a single day. They withered gradually. Fewer leaves, slower growth. Landscapes, once filled with food, becoming barren. And for enormous creatures requiring vast quantities of vegetation every day, this became catastrophic. There is something deeply tragic in that image. The giants that had ruled the planet for hundreds of millions of years, slowly weakening simply because the world around them no longer provided enough food. According to Jung, modern humanity often imagines strength as something existing entirely within the individual. But nature reminds us, all life depends upon the environment around it. No creature truly survives alone. No matter how powerful dinosaurs were, they still depended upon forests, water, stable climates, and balanced ecosystems. When those foundations collapsed, even the greatest creatures became fragile. Then came the predators. At first, one might assume, if herbivores weaken, predators would thrive. But nature is never that simple. As prey disappeared, predators began starving as well. Ecosystems resemble invisible webs, every link connected to every other. If one part disappears, the rest begin trembling too. Perhaps that is the most terrifying thing about extinction. Not the death of individual creatures, but the collapse of an entire world that had functioned in harmony for millions of years. According to Jung, human beings often realize how deeply connected we are only when those connections begin breaking apart. And this is true for families, societies, and nature itself. Dinosaurs did not disappear only because of the asteroid. They disappeared because the system that once sustained their lives no longer existed in the same form. The climate also began changing unpredictably. Some periods became unusually cold. Some regions suffered long droughts. Rainfall patterns shifted chaotically. Creatures that had evolved across millions of years to survive within a particular world now faced a planet changing far too quickly. And this makes the extinction story even more heartbreaking. Because dinosaurs did not fail through weakness. They simply could not adapt quickly enough to the enormous speed of Earth's transformation. According to Jung, Much human suffering comes from something similar, not because we are weak, but because the world changes faster than the mind can adapt. Perhaps that is why the story of dinosaur extinction still touches us so deeply. It reflects a profoundly human fear, the fear of losing the familiar world. If we imagine the final years of the dinosaur age, perhaps it would feel like a planet growing quieter, fewer migrating herds, fewer calls echoing through ancient forests. Plains once filled with gigantic creatures slowly becoming emptier over time. There was no single clear final day, only gradual disappearance. And perhaps that is the saddest part, because the world did not end with screams. It ended with growing silence. According to Jung, silence is often more frightening than noise, because within silence, human beings begin realizing what has been lost. Perhaps that is what ancient Earth itself experienced as the age of dinosaurs slowly faded away. A planet once filled with gigantic footsteps, gradually becoming empty. Yet if we look deeply enough, this story is not entirely tragedy, because nature never truly stops. Even as many dinosaurs disappeared, other small creatures began discovering opportunity. Tiny mammals surviving within darkness slowly began thriving. Ancient birds continued evolving. Life moved into its next chapter. According to Jung, every ending is also a transformation. Human beings often view disappearance as something purely negative, but nature sees differently. One ecosystem collapses, so another may emerge. One age ends, so another may begin. This does not erase the sadness, but it makes the story of dinosaurs even deeper, because even extinction itself is part of a greater cycle of life. Perhaps what moves humanity most deeply about dinosaurs is not only their size or mystery, but the feeling that they existed for an unimaginably long time and still vanished. And that reminds us, everything within the universe is impermanent. Species, civilizations, even the things that appear most eternal. Yet at the same time, life always continues beneath new forms. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine ancient Earth slowly entering an age of silence after millions of glorious years, humanity is not only thinking about the extinction of dinosaurs, we are reflecting upon the deepest law of life itself. Every world eventually changes, and life always continues walking forward, even after an age has come to an end. Part 9. Birds survived. Perhaps one of the most beautiful things the history of life has ever left behind on Earth is the truth that, after the darkness of extinction, something always continues to survive. When the Chicxulub asteroid struck the planet, the world of dinosaurs began to collapse. Forests burned, the sky darkened beneath ash and dust, food chains shattered. The gigantic creatures that had ruled Earth for hundreds of millions of years slowly vanished from the world. If we look at that moment, everything seems like an ending. But nature rarely tells its story in such absolute ways. Within the long night of extinction, small creatures still continued living. Not the giants that once shook the ground, but feathered creatures that were smaller, lighter, faster, and better adapted to a broken world. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are always searching for hope within stories of survival. Because deep within the unconscious, we understand that every life must pass through darkness before discovering its next form. Perhaps that is why the story of the first birds touches humanity so deeply. Because they were not merely creatures that survived extinction, they became proof that life always finds a way to continue. If we return to Earth after the asteroid catastrophe, it would be a colder, darker, and far less living world. The primeval forests that once stretched endlessly had become fields of blackened earth. Many plants disappeared. Food became scarce, and in such a world, gigantic size was no longer an advantage. In fact, it became a burden. Large creatures required enormous amounts of food to survive, but the planet could no longer provide enough resources. And so, smaller creatures began finding opportunity. According to Jung, sometimes what allows human beings to survive crisis is not strength, but flexibility. Things that are too rigid often break when the world changes. Things that are lighter and more adaptable have a greater chance of surviving. Primitive birds became the embodiment of that truth. They were smaller, they required less food, and they could survive within harsher environments than the enormous dinosaurs. This may sound simple, but it was an enormous advantage. During the period after the asteroid impact, food was no longer stable. A gigantic creature required huge quantities of plants or meat every day, but a small creature needed very little in order to continue living. Perhaps this is one of nature's deepest laws. During times of crisis, simplicity often becomes strength. According to Jung, modern human beings also carry too many things: ambition, anxiety, material burdens, and expectations. But when catastrophe arrives, lighter things often survive more easily. Perhaps nature understood this millions of years ago. Besides their smaller size, another reason ancient birds survived was this: they were omnivorous. And this was incredibly important. When ecosystems collapsed, many food sources disappeared entirely. Creatures dependent upon only one type of food became extremely vulnerable to extinction. But small birds could eat seeds, insects, carrion, or whatever remained within the changing world. That flexibility saved them. There is something deeply profound in this. According to Jung, the human mind matures when it learns how to adapt to reality, instead of forcing the world to match its desires. Ancient birds survived, not because they were the strongest. They survived because they adapted the fastest. Nature has never truly favored the strongest. It favors the creatures capable of change. Another advantage was this: they reproduced quickly. During extinction events, many creatures died before reproducing or raising offspring to maturity. But smaller species had shorter reproductive cycles, laying eggs more quickly, maturing faster, and rebuilding populations more easily. And this allowed life to continue even while the world became unimaginably harsh. Perhaps that is why birds today still carry such a vivid feeling of life. They are always moving, building nests, searching for food, reproducing, and filling the sky with the sounds of continuation. According to Jung, one of the oldest symbols within the human unconscious is the bird. Across many cultures, birds symbolize hope, the soul, freedom, and rebirth. Perhaps that is not accidental, because in the history of nature, birds truly became symbols of rebirth after extinction. Perhaps the most miraculous thing of all is this: they could fly. When the ground became dangerous and poor in resources, flight offered an enormous advantage. Birds could travel long distances to search for food, escape predators, and find new shelter when environments changed. While many creatures remained trapped within a collapsing world, birds possessed the entire sky. There is something deeply beautiful in that image. Amid a planet sinking into darkness after extinction, small feathered creatures still continued flying, as though nature itself was not yet ready for life to end. According to Jung, wings have always symbolized the ability to transcend limitation. Perhaps that is why human beings feel so moved when watching birds fly. Because somewhere deep within the mind, we recognize in them a reminder: life always finds a way to rise beyond darkness. If we imagine Earth after the extinction of dinosaurs, perhaps it would have become a far quieter world. No more gigantic footsteps, no more herds of sauropods migrating across plains. But within that silence, birdsong remained. At first, perhaps only small sounds, echoing through forests beginning to recover. But across millions of years, those sounds spread across the planet. And this makes the story of birds one of the most beautiful chapters in the history of life, because they remind us, life does not need to preserve its old form in order to continue. Dinosaurs did not completely disappear. Part of them learned how to become lighter, smaller, more flexible, and able to rise into the sky. According to Jung, human beings often suffer because we cling too tightly to old versions of ourselves. But nature is always transforming. What survives longest is not what remains unchanged. It is what learns how to change while preserving its deepest essence. Birds are perhaps the most beautiful example of that truth. Beneath soft wings and morning songs, traces of the dinosaur world still remain. Hollow bones, feathers, nesting behaviors, and ancient bloodlines stretching across tens of millions of years. And this changes the sky we see today. Every small bird gliding across a modern sunset carries within it a distant fragment of ancient Earth, a living memory of the age of dinosaurs still existing around us each day. Perhaps that is what makes this story so beautiful, because after every loss, life still continues singing. And perhaps, during the quietest mornings, when birds begin singing outside the window, humanity is not only hearing the sound of the present, we are hearing the distant echo of tiny creatures that once survived the greatest darkness in Earth's history and continued carrying life through the sky until today. Part de set, Tyrannosaurus rex. Perhaps no creature in the history of Earth has haunted the human imagination more deeply than Tyrannosaurus rex. The moment we hear that name, the mind immediately summons images of heavy footsteps within primeval forests, a gigantic head filled with sharp teeth, and the cold eyes of an ancient predator. Within popular culture, Tyrannosaurus rex has almost become the ultimate symbol of primal power, a king of the prehistoric world. But if we look beyond the roars and terrifying images, Tyrannosaurus rex was not merely a monster. It was one of the most astonishing examples of how nature shapes life to survive within a world filled with competition and danger. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are always fascinated by figures representing absolute power. Within the collective unconscious, gigantic predators often symbolize primal fear, uncontrollable power, and the shadow hidden deep within the human mind. Perhaps that is why Tyrannosaurus rex never truly disappeared from humanity's imagination. It is not merely a fossil, it is a symbol. If we could travel back roughly 66 million years and stand inside an ancient forest heavy with humid air, perhaps the first feeling upon seeing Tyrannosaurus rex would not be fear, but awe. Its enormous body moving slowly between ancient trees, each step creating gentle tremors beneath the damp earth. It did not need to run constantly. It did not need to roar endlessly. Its mere presence was enough to silence the world around it. There is something deeply ancient in that image, as though nature once attempted to create a creature carrying all the planet's primal power within a single body. What made Tyrannosaurus rex especially extraordinary was perhaps its jaws. Scientists believe its bite force was stronger than that of nearly any land animal that has ever existed, powerful enough to crush bone. This is very different from many modern predators that mainly slice flesh. Tyrannosaurus rex did not merely tear, it crushed. When those massive jaws closed, bones shattered like dry branches. At first, this sounds horrifying, but if we look deeply enough, it was not cruelty. It was evolutionary efficiency. In nature, there is no space for waste. A gigantic creature requires enormous energy in order to survive. The ability to crush bone allowed Tyrannosaurus rex to utilize nearly the entire body of its prey, flesh, marrow, and nutrients hidden deep within bone. Nature did not create it to be terrifying. Nature created it to survive. According to Jung, human beings often project morality onto nature. We call violent things evil, but nature does not function through good and evil. It functions through balance. A predator exists because life requires cycles: birth, hunting, death, and renewal. Perhaps that is what makes Tyrannosaurus rex feel both terrifying and strangely beautiful, because it embodies a law older than civilization itself. Life must consume other life in order to continue. What is fascinating is this. For many years, scientists debated whether Tyrannosaurus rex was an active hunter or merely a scavenger. Today, most evidence suggests it may have been both. And in truth, that makes perfect sense. In the modern natural world, many large predators also consume carrion whenever possible, because survival is not about honor, it is about energy. If an animal has already died, using that food source is simply intelligent. There is something deeply practical and ancient in this. According to Jung, modern humanity often romanticizes nature, but primal nature does not operate through ideals. It operates through adaptation. Tyrannosaurus rex survived because it was flexible. When necessary, it hunted. When opportunity appeared, it scavenged. This does not make it less powerful. On the contrary, it reveals that intelligent life always learns to use every opportunity in order to survive. If we imagine a sunset at the end of the Cretaceous period, perhaps somewhere across an ancient plain, the silhouette of Tyrannosaurus rex moved slowly through pale red mist, not hurried, not frantic. A creature at the top of the food chain rarely needs to rush. Perhaps that is what gives it such a king-like presence. Not merely size or strength, but calmness. According to Jung, true power often arrives with silence. The strongest things do not constantly need to prove their strength. Tyrannosaurus rex was the same. Its mere existence changed the atmosphere of an entire ancient forest. But if we look even deeper, Tyrannosaurus rex was also a creature of fragility. That may sound strange. How could a gigantic creature with bone-crushing jaws be fragile? But remember, every creature in nature depends upon the world surrounding it. Even the king of prehistory still required suitable climates, stable ecosystems, and when nature changed after the Chicxulub asteroid, even Tyrannosaurus rex could not resist it. Perhaps this is the saddest part of its story. A creature that once stood at the height of power upon the planet eventually disappeared. According to Jung, human beings mature when they understand. No power is eternal. No king lasts forever. And this is true for civilizations, empires, and even the greatest predators in Earth's history. Perhaps it is this impermanence that makes Tyrannosaurus rex feel even more legendary. Because it does not only symbolize power, it symbolizes the passage of time itself. Today, all that remains are fossils, bite marks upon ancient bones, and humanity's imagination. Yet, strangely enough, after tens of millions of years, the name Tyrannosaurus rex alone still causes the human mind to tremble. Perhaps because deep within the unconscious, humanity still remembers the primal feeling of standing before something vastly greater than ourselves, a force belonging to a world far older than modern civilization. According to Jung, the most powerful symbols never truly die. They continue living within dreams, myths, films, and humanity's collective imagination. Tyrannosaurus rex has become such a symbol, not merely a dinosaur, but an echo from an age when nature was wilder than anything humanity has ever known. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine an ancient forest where a Tyrannosaurus rex slowly walks through darkness beneath humid skies, humanity is not merely thinking about a predator. We are looking into the most primal image of power, instinct, and impermanence within life itself upon this earth. Part 11. Triceratops. Perhaps within the ancient world of dinosaurs, not all strength came from teeth and hunting. Some creatures were not born to chase prey, yet still carried within them the power to make even the greatest predators hesitate. And Triceratops was one of those creatures. When modern humans look upon the fossils of Triceratops, The first feeling is often amazement. 3 great horns rising from a gigantic face. A broad, bony frill behind the head like an ancient shield. A heavy yet solid body resembling a living fortress. If Tyrannosaurus rex carried the image of the primal predator, then Triceratops feels like the embodiment of endurance. Not a ruler through hunting, but a creature surviving through the ability to stand firm against danger. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, the human unconscious contains 2 kinds of strength: the strength of attack and the strength of defense. One rushes forward to dominate the world. The other learns how to remain steady within a dangerous world. Perhaps that is why Triceratops feels so different from predatory dinosaurs. It does not carry the terror of darkness. It carries the quiet weight of resilience. If we could travel back to the end of the Cretaceous period and stand within a vast plain beneath the faint red light of an ancient sunset, perhaps we would see herds of Triceratops slowly moving through fern-covered land. They were not especially fast, not aggressively violent, yet there was something deeply unshakable in the way they walked. Their great horns, reflecting dim light beneath humid prehistoric skies, massive heads lowered as they moved through thick vegetation, and perhaps somewhere in the distance, a Tyrannosaurus rex was watching. And the remarkable thing is this: unlike many herbivores, Triceratops possessed the ability to make even gigantic predators think carefully before attacking. And that made it one of the most extraordinary creatures of the dinosaur age. In nature, most herbivores survive through running away, hiding, or living within groups. But Triceratops seemed to choose a different strategy, facing danger directly. Its 3 horns were not merely decoration, they were real weapons. Scientists believe Triceratops may have used them to defend against predators, fight rivals, or protect territory and young. If a Tyrannosaurus rex charged toward it, Triceratops did not necessarily need to flee. It could lower its head and counterattack with the full weight of its body. There is something deeply ancient and deeply moving in that image. A herbivore, yet strong enough to stand before one of the most terrifying predators in Earth's history. According to Jung, human beings often confuse gentleness with weakness, but nature understands the difference. A creature does not need to be aggressive in order to be powerful. Triceratops did not hunt or kill needlessly, but when threatened, it knew how to protect itself. Perhaps this is also a profound lesson for the human mind. That maturity does not mean becoming more aggressive. Sometimes, true strength lies in the ability to maintain boundaries, protect what matters, and refuse to collapse beneath the pressure of the world. What is fascinating is this: the great, bony frill behind the head of Triceratops was not merely for appearance. It may have helped protect the neck, support jaw muscles, or serve social communication purposes. Nature rarely creates anything meaningless. Even the strange appearance of Triceratops was the result of millions of years of delicate evolution. Perhaps that is what makes it beautiful in such a unique way. Not soft beauty, but the beauty of a creature shaped to survive within a dangerous world. If we look deeply enough, Triceratops does not resemble a monster. It resembles a creature carrying the ancient memory of defense and perseverance. According to Jung, horns within the human unconscious often symbolize instinctive strength, willpower, and the ability to resist darkness. Perhaps that is why Triceratops feels powerful without feeling cruel. It resembles a guardian more than a conqueror. If we imagine a confrontation between Triceratops and Tyrannosaurus rex, perhaps it would not be a battle between good and evil. It would be a meeting between 2 survival strategies. One side representing predatory power, the other representing defensive strength. Both are products of nature. Neither is evil, only life struggling to survive in different ways. According to Jung, human beings often divide the world into simple opposites: the strong and the weak, light and darkness. But nature is far more complex. Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops were not enemies in the human sense. They were simply two different parts of the same ancient ecosystem. One thing that makes Triceratops especially remarkable is this: it may have lived in herds, and this increased protection against predators. Imagine a group of adult Triceratops standing around their young upon an ancient plain, their horns facing outward, their enormous bodies forming a natural circle of protection. There is something deeply emotional in that image, because even within the dangerous world of dinosaurs, the instinct to protect still existed powerfully. According to Jung, people often imagine prehistory as nothing but violence. But nature does not function only through killing. It also functions through care, protection, and connection. Perhaps that is why Triceratops feels closer to humanity than many other dinosaurs, because beneath thick skin and gigantic horns, it still reflects things that feel deeply familiar: resilience, responsibility, and the instinct to protect what is loved. The strange thing is this: no matter how powerful it was, Triceratops eventually vanished alongside its age. And that gives its story a profound sadness. A creature, once strong enough to confront the greatest predator on Earth, still could not resist the changing of the world itself. According to Jung, no strength completely conquers time. Even the most magnificent creatures are only small parts within the immense flow of life's history. Perhaps that is what makes Triceratops feel even more beautiful to modern humanity, because it does not merely symbolize strength, it symbolizes courage, not the courage of conquest, but the courage of standing firm in the face of danger. If we look deeply enough, Triceratops resembles an ancient symbol of endurance, not the fastest, not the most aggressive, but strong enough not to be easily broken. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine prehistoric plains where herds of Triceratops move slowly beneath ancient crimson skies, humanity is not merely thinking about a dinosaur. We are seeing a deeply familiar image within our own souls: the ability to remain steady within a world forever filled with danger and change. Part 12. Stegosaurus, Ankylosaurus. Perhaps one of the strangest things about the world of dinosaurs is that nature never seemed to stop experimenting with different forms of life. Some creatures were swift as wind, some were as gigantic as moving mountains, some became predators armed with razor-sharp teeth, and then there were creatures that carried entire defensive systems upon their own bodies, as though born from an ancient imagination. Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus were such creatures. When modern humans look at their fossils, the first feeling is often astonishment. How could nature create bodies so strange? One species carried towering plates along its spine and a tail filled with spikes. Another resembled a living fortress, covered in heavy armor, with a tail like a giant war hammer. If Tyrannosaurus rex represented the primal power of predation, then Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus represented the opposite: the art of survival through defense. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings also create armor to protect themselves. Sometimes strength, sometimes emotional distance, sometimes silence. Perhaps that is why armored dinosaurs feel strangely familiar deep within the unconscious mind, because beneath the spikes and bone plates lies the oldest instinct, shared by every living creature: the desire to feel safe. If we traveled back tens of millions of years and entered a mist-covered prehistoric forest at dawn, perhaps we would encounter a Stegosaurus slowly moving through low vegetation. It was not especially fast, not especially agile, yet its body possessed a shape impossible to mistake. Large, bony plates rose along its back like ancient stone leaves. Its long tail dragged behind it, ending in sharp spikes reflecting the dim light of prehistoric morning. For many years, scientists debated the purpose of those plates. Perhaps they helped regulate body temperature, attract mates, or make the animal appear larger to predators. Whatever their purpose, They gave Stegosaurus an appearance both strange and beautiful in a deeply ancient way. But its true weapon lay within the tail. At the end of that tail were enormous spikes capable of inflicting devastating injuries upon predators. If attacked, Stegosaurus could swing its tail with tremendous force, and this made even large predators cautious. There is something deeply meaningful in the way nature shaped Stegosaurus. It did not need to outrun predators. It learned how to make attacking it too dangerous. According to Jung, maturity does not always come from winning every battle. Sometimes, maturity means building boundaries strong enough that others cannot easily wound you. Stegosaurus feels almost like an ancient embodiment of that lesson. A creature that did not hunt, did not conquer, yet carried enough defensive power to survive within a dangerous world. If Stegosaurus resembles a creature of warning, then Ankylosaurus resembles a true fortress. Perhaps no dinosaur of the prehistoric age looked more unbreakable than Ankylosaurus. Its entire body was covered in thick, armored bone. Its head stayed low to the ground. Its back was broad and heavy, like an ancient armored vehicle. And then, the tail, a tail ending in a massive club of bone. If a predator approached too closely, Ankylosaurus could swing its tail with enough force to break bones. This made it one of the most dangerous herbivores a predator could attempt to attack. According to Jung, armor within the human unconscious carries deep symbolic meaning. It represents the effort to protect oneself from the wounds of the world. Perhaps that is why Ankylosaurus feels so emotionally powerful. It resembles a creature created from fear of injury, yet transforming that fear into strength. If we imagine a confrontation between Ankylosaurus and a large predator, it would probably not resemble the violent chases often shown in films. It would be a contest of patience. The predator searching for weakness, Ankylosaurus keeping its body low, protecting its vulnerable parts. Difficult to approach, difficult to defeat. There is something very quiet about that kind of strength. According to Jung, some people do not need to become aggressive in order to be powerful. They simply learn not to become easily broken. Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus seem to embody that kind of strength within the prehistoric world. The strange thing is this: the more humanity studies these ancient creatures, the more we realize nature is never simple. It does not only create sharp teeth, speed, or massive size. It creates countless strategies for survival. Some species survive by running fast. Some survive through camouflage. Some survive through attack. And some survive by transforming their own bodies into fortresses. According to Jung, the human mind works similarly. Each person develops different defense mechanisms: humor, silence, distance, or a strong outward appearance. Because deep beneath everything, every living creature understands the world can cause pain. Perhaps that is why Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus feel strangely human at an unconscious level. No matter how alien they appear, they still reflect a primal fear shared by all life, the fear of being harmed within a dangerous world. If we look deeply enough, their spikes and armor were not merely weapons. They were stories of adaptation. Nature does not give every creature the chance to become the strongest predator, but it gives them other ways to survive. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful lessons from the dinosaur age. Life does not survive only through offensive power. Sometimes, it survives through the ability to protect itself. According to Jung, modern humanity often believes we must constantly advance, fight, and conquer. But nature reveals something different. Some creatures survived millions of years simply by learning how to defend themselves well. That is not weakness. It is the wisdom of life itself. If we imagine an ancient afternoon where pale red sunlight filters through mist in a prehistoric forest, perhaps somewhere within thick vegetation, the heavy silhouette of an Ankylosaurus slowly moves forward, not hurried, not afraid, because its own body has already become a shield against the world. There is something deeply peaceful in that image, as though nature once attempted to create creatures that did not need to become predators in order to be strong. They were powerful in another way, quieter, more enduring, and very difficult to defeat. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine armored creatures walking through prehistoric forests beneath ancient star-filled skies, humanity is not merely thinking about dinosaurs. We are reflecting upon ourselves, upon the invisible armor the human soul creates in order to survive within a vast and sometimes dangerous world. Part 13. Spinosaurus. Perhaps when human beings think about dinosaurs, we usually imagine creatures walking upon land, enormous herds crossing plains, predators hiding within ancient forests, or footsteps shaking the earth during prehistoric ages. But the world of dinosaurs never belonged only to land. Within humid swamps, along enormous rivers reflecting ancient skies, there once existed a creature both familiar and strange beyond belief. Spinosaurus, a creature with the body of a dinosaur, yet a spirit that seemed to belong to water. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are always fascinated by creatures living between two worlds, because within the unconscious, they symbolize transition between land and water, between instinct and adaptation, between the old and whatever is evolving into something new. Perhaps that is why Spinosaurus carries such a mysterious feeling. It does not fully resemble any other dinosaur. If we traveled back roughly 95 million years and stood beside a vast river in what is now North Africa, perhaps we would encounter a world very different from the usual image of dinosaur times. Not dry plains, but endless wetlands, ancient mangrove forests, steaming swamps, and deep rivers where giant fish moved silently beneath dark waters. That was the world of Spinosaurus. Within the dim light of prehistoric evening, a gigantic body slowly steps into shallow water. Its crocodile-like snout glides near the surface. Cone-shaped teeth reflect weak sunlight, and then, within a single moment, the water explodes. A giant fish vanishes inside ancient jaws. There is something profoundly different about the way Spinosaurus hunted. It did not charge across plains like Tyrannosaurus rex. It belonged to rivers. According to Jung, water is one of the deepest symbols within the human unconscious. Water represents the unconscious mind, ancient memory, and the hidden things beneath the surface of thought. Perhaps that is why creatures connected to water always feel more mysterious. Spinosaurus was not merely a predator. It resembled a creature emerging from the deepest and most primitive layers of nature itself. What made Spinosaurus especially remarkable was its adaptation to aquatic environments. For many years, scientists debated whether it truly lived a semi-aquatic lifestyle. But more and more evidence suggests Spinosaurus did not merely cross rivers, it lived with water. Its body possessed many unusual features: a crocodile-like snout, teeth suited for gripping slippery fish, shorter hind legs than many land predators, and possibly a tail adapted for swimming. And this made it one of evolution's strangest experiments. Nature seemed to be attempting something entirely new, a predatory dinosaur between two worlds. If we look deeply enough, this is beautiful, because nature never stands still. It constantly changes, constantly experiments, constantly searches for new ways life can adapt. According to Jung, human beings often suffer because they want a fixed identity, but nature does not function that way. The creatures that survive longest are often those capable of changing alongside the world. Spinosaurus became an image of that transformation. It did not compete directly with land predators in the usual way. Instead, it found another path. Rather than hunting giant dinosaurs across plains, it exploited the immense food resources hidden within prehistoric river systems. There is something deeply intelligent in that strategy. According to Jung, maturity is not always about defeating others. Sometimes, it means discovering where one truly belongs. Spinosaurus seems to have done exactly that tens of millions of years ago. While many predators competed upon land, it stepped into water. If we imagine an ancient sunset where red light fades behind prehistoric swamps, perhaps Spinosaurus appears like a gigantic shadow near the water's edge, not overly fast, not hurried. Water ripples gently beneath each heavy step. Far away, echo the sounds of ancient insects, dripping water from trees, and fish disturbing dark river currents. There is something deeply lonely in that image. Spinosaurus does not feel like a king in the way Tyrannosaurus rex does. It feels more like a creature of borders, a wanderer between land and water. According to Jung, figures existing between worlds often symbolize journeys of self-discovery, because they never fully belong to one place. Perhaps that is why Spinosaurus fascinates modern humanity so strongly. It is difficult to understand, difficult to fit into familiar ideas about dinosaurs. And what is especially fascinating is this: despite being one of the largest predators ever to exist, Spinosaurus looked very different from humanity's image of perfect strength. Its body was strange, its proportions awkward by the standards of land predators. Yet those very differences made it perfectly suited to its own environment. Perhaps this is a profound lesson. According to Jung, human beings often try to become the version society considers correct, but nature shows something else. Every creature survives best when suited to its own path. Spinosaurus did not need to become Tyrannosaurus rex. It became itself, a creature of ancient rivers, and this gives its story a very special beauty. Not the beauty of domination, but the beauty of adaptation. If we look deeply enough, Spinosaurus feels like a reminder that life is always more complex than human imagination expects. Even during the dinosaur age, nature created creatures almost beyond familiar logic. A fish-hunting dinosaur with a crocodile-like snout, living near water, and perhaps swimming through ancient rivers beneath humid skies. There is something dreamlike about that image, as though Spinosaurus does not fully belong to reality itself, but to an ancient dream once dreamed by the planet. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine a prehistoric river where a Spinosaurus silently walks through dark waters beneath deep crimson sunsets, humanity is not merely thinking about a dinosaur. We are seeing a deeper symbol, the ability to change, adapt, and discover where we truly belong within a world forever shifting around us. Part 14. The Strange Ones. Perhaps one of the most beautiful things about the dinosaur world is that nature never created only the creatures humans would consider perfect. Instead, it created forms so strange they sometimes feel dreamlike. Creatures, not entirely belonging to the past, not entirely resembling the present, and seeming to exist somewhere within life's endless process of transformation. Therizinosaurus, Microraptor, Archaeopteryx. Each of them feels like a reminder that evolution does not move in straight lines. It experiments, it changes, it makes mistakes, and sometimes it creates creatures so strange that even modern humanity struggles to believe they truly existed. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings are always fascinated by beings existing between states, between animal and human, between old and new, between instinct and consciousness. Because within the unconscious, transitional creatures reflect the human soul itself, a being forever becoming something else. Perhaps that is why strange dinosaurs feel so emotionally powerful. They are not merely fossils. They resemble moments when nature itself was thinking, experimenting, and reshaping its own identity. If we traveled back into mist-filled ancient forests, perhaps one of the most astonishing creatures would be Therizinosaurus. At first glance, it barely resembles any familiar dinosaur. A large body, a long neck, slow movement, and then the hands. gigantic claws like enormous sickles reflecting dim prehistoric light. For many years, scientists were deeply confused by this creature. Some even imagined it as a terrifying predator, because those claws looked like perfect killing weapons. But eventually, the truth emerged. Therizinosaurus was mainly herbivorous, and this transformed it into one of evolution's strangest paradoxes. A gentle creature, carrying hands that looked like something from a nightmare. There is something deeply meaningful in that image. According to Jung, human beings often judge everything by appearance. We assume sharp things are dangerous, large things are violent, and unusual things are frightening. But nature does not always follow that logic. Therizinosaurus reminds us, not all power exists for destruction. Perhaps those gigantic claws we're used to pull branches closer, defend itself, or communicate with others. If we imagine it within ancient forests, Therizinosaurus would probably not move like a predator. It would slowly walk through giant ferns, its long claws gently pulling branches closer toward its mouth. There is something both bizarre and peaceful in that image. A creature looking like a monster, simply searching for leaves beneath prehistoric sunsets. According to Jung, the shadow within human beings is not always evil. Sometimes what frightens us is simply what we do not yet understand. Perhaps Therizinosaurus is like that. It confuses humanity because it does not fit familiar categories. Yet that is exactly what makes it beautiful. If Therizinosaurus represents the strangeness of form, then Microraptor resembles the first dream of flight, a tiny creature living among ancient forests, covered entirely in feathers. But the most extraordinary thing was this: it possessed 4 wings, not only its arms. Even its legs carried long feathers helping create lift. At first glance, Microraptor resembles a creature from a moment when nature itself had not yet fully decided what birds would eventually become. Perhaps that is what makes it magical. It was not completely dinosaur, yet not fully bird either. It was transition itself. According to Jung, transitional phases within human life always carry special emotional power. Childhood into adulthood, darkness into light, old selves into new ones. Because during those moments, identity is still forming. Microraptor feels exactly like that. A creature learning how to leave the earth for the first time. If we imagine the forest where Microraptor lived, perhaps it was a world filled with humidity and soft green light filtering through ancient trees. Between enormous trunks, a small feathered creature glides from branch to branch, not fully flying like modern birds, yet no longer completely trapped upon the ground. There is something profoundly poetic in that image, as though nature itself was dreaming about the sky for the very first time. According to Jung, humanity has always been fascinated by wings, because flight symbolizes freedom, transformation, and transcending old limitations. Microraptor feels like the earliest embodiment of that longing within the history of life. And then, Archaeopteryx appeared. Perhaps no fossil changed humanity's understanding of dinosaurs more deeply than Archaeopteryx, because it became an almost living bridge between two worlds, dinosaurs and birds. It possessed teeth, claws, a long dinosaur-like tail, yet also feathers and wings. When the first Archaeopteryx fossil was discovered, the scientific world was astonished, because, for the first time, humanity clearly saw that birds did not appear suddenly. They evolved gradually from ancient creatures carrying characteristics of both worlds. There is something deeply beautiful in that idea. Nature does not leap from one form directly into another. It transforms slowly. According to Jung, human beings mature the same way. We do not become new versions of ourselves in a single instant. We slowly transform through countless subtle changes. Archaeopteryx feels like an ancient symbol of that process. If we imagine it beneath the dawn light of the prehistoric world, perhaps Archaeopteryx sits upon a high branch within a mist-filled forest. a creature both ancient and strangely modern. And when it spreads feathered wings, nature itself seems to reveal the future of the sky. According to Jung, transitional creatures affect humanity deeply because they reflect one of life's greatest truths. Nothing remains still forever. Everything is changing. Every creature is part of evolution's long journey. Therizinosaurus, Microraptor, Archaeopteryx. At first glance, they seem strange and unusual, but in truth, these strange creatures reveal how creative nature truly is. It does not create only strength, speed, or size. It creates possibilities. Some creatures experiment with flight. Some carry terrifying weapons without being hunters. Some stand between two ages like living bridges of evolution. Perhaps this is what makes dinosaur history so beautiful. Because it is not merely the story of ancient monsters, it is the story of life endlessly experimenting in search of new forms. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when we imagine those strange creatures walking silently beneath ancient moons within prehistoric forests, humanity is not merely thinking about dinosaurs. We are seeing the image of life itself, always changing, always evolving, always becoming something new within the endless river of time. Part 15. Caring for the young and building nests. For many years, perhaps humanity imagined the world of dinosaurs as something cold, a world made only of hunting, survival, and gigantic creatures walking across the planet through primitive instinct alone. But the deeper scientists studied fossils, the more they discovered something very different. The world of dinosaurs may not have been as emotionless as we once believed. Between ancient primordial forests, beneath the sounds of insects echoing under prehistoric skies, there once existed nests, eggs carefully protected, young offspring cared for, groups of dinosaurs living close together like communities. And this changed the way humanity viewed them forever. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, one of the deepest primordial images within the human unconscious is the parent protecting the child. That symbol appears within dreams, myths, religions, and every culture throughout history. Because beneath all differences, all living things share the same instinct, to protect what is more fragile than themselves. Perhaps that is why, when humans discovered that dinosaurs also cared for their young, they suddenly felt far more familiar. No longer merely ancient monsters, but living creatures capable of affection, devotion, and the desire to continue life just like countless other beings upon Earth. If we could travel back tens of millions of years and walk into a nesting ground somewhere in the ancient world, perhaps the scene would look very different from the usual image of dinosaurs in films. Not violent chases, but stillness, large nests, resting upon soft earth and prehistoric vegetation. Eggs arranged carefully in circles, adult dinosaurs standing nearby, alert against danger. There is something deeply moving in that image, because even across tens of millions of years, the instinct to protect offspring seems to remain one of the foundations of life itself. For many years, scientists believed dinosaurs simply laid eggs and abandoned them like many modern reptiles. But then the fossils began telling another story. Researchers discovered nests arranged in orderly patterns, evidence of adults resting upon nests, and fossils of juveniles living close to their parents. This suggested that at least some dinosaur species cared for their young far more than humanity once imagined. Some may even have incubated eggs like modern birds. Imagine that for a moment. Within a dangerous prehistoric world, a gigantic creature that's sitting motionless beside its eggs beneath ancient rain, not hunting, not moving, simply waiting for tiny life beneath the shells to begin stirring. According to Jung, caregiving is one of the deepest expressions of connection, because to care means placing the future of another being above one's immediate needs. And this transforms dinosaurs entirely from the cold image humans once projected onto them. Perhaps they too once felt concern, vigilance, and patient anticipation, while waiting for their young to emerge beneath prehistoric skies. One of the most touching discoveries is this: many species may have lived in herds, and this changes how we imagine the dinosaur world completely. No longer lonely creatures wandering the planet alone, but communities. When scientists studied fossilized footprints, they discovered groups of dinosaurs traveling together: adults, juveniles, and individuals of different ages. This suggests that social life may have existed far more strongly than once believed. Perhaps herds once protected one another from predators, searched for water together, and raised offspring within dangerous environments. According to Jung, humanity often forgets. The instinct for community is not something invented by modern civilization. It is ancient. Even within prehistoric worlds, life already understood. Staying together increased the chance of survival. If we imagine a herd of herbivorous dinosaurs moving across primordial plains, perhaps the young always remain near the center. Adults walking around the outside like living walls. There is something profoundly familiar about that image, because humans have done the same thing for thousands of years, protecting children at the center of the community. According to Jung, the human unconscious carries deep memories of collective protection. Perhaps that is why images such as circles around fires, families gathered together, or herds shielding their young, always create such a primal feeling of safety. Dinosaurs may have experienced something similar in their own way. What is especially fascinating is this: the nurturing behaviors of dinosaurs bring them remarkably close to modern birds. Today, when we watch a bird patiently incubating eggs beneath rain, we may be witnessing behavior that already existed during the age of dinosaurs. That is extraordinary, because suddenly, the past no longer feels so distant. A fragment of the ancient world still survives around us, in morning birdsong, in tiny nests beneath rooftops, and in the instinct to protect offspring that has endured across tens of millions of years. According to Jung, the things that survive longest are often not power, but care. Empires collapse, predators disappear, yet the instinct to nurture life continues, passing through generation after generation. Perhaps that is the most beautiful part of this story, that even within the dangerous world of dinosaurs, gentleness still existed. Not gentleness in the modern human sense, but the primal gentleness of nature itself, protecting eggs, sheltering offspring, and carrying life forward through time. If we look deeply enough, this makes the prehistoric world feel even sadder when we think about extinction, because not only giant creatures vanished, but also nests, migrating families, and nurturing behaviors that endured for millions of years disappeared alongside that age. According to Jung, human beings grieve not only death, we grieve broken connections. Perhaps that is why the story of dinosaurs caring for their young moves us so deeply, because for the first time, we no longer see them merely as monsters. We recognize within them something profoundly similar to ourselves: care, attachment, and a fragile vulnerability of protecting a small life within an immense world. If we imagine an ancient night beneath star-filled skies, perhaps somewhere across primordial plains, an adult dinosaur rests quietly beside a nest of eggs. Night winds move through prehistoric vegetation. Far away echo insects and predators within darkness, yet it remains there, guarding life not yet born. There is something sacred in that image, as though nature, no matter how wild, always leaves room for care and continuation. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humanity imagines dinosaur nests lying silently beneath the moonlight of ancient Earth, we are not merely thinking about prehistory, we are witnessing one of the deepest truths of life itself, that amid all dangers within the world, the instinct to protect and nurture remains one of the most powerful forces ever to exist upon this planet. Part 16. Communication and display. Perhaps when humans think about dinosaurs, we usually imagine terrifying roars, primitive hunts, or gigantic creatures, driven only by simple instinct. But the deeper scientists study them, the more surprising the truth becomes. The dinosaur world may have been far more emotionally and socially complex than we once imagined. They did not merely hunt or survive, they also expressed themselves, communicated with one another, attracted mates, and sent signals through color, sound, and body structure. In other words, the dinosaur world may once have been filled with silent languages, whose traces remain only in fossils today. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, humans are not the only creatures who long to be seen and recognized. Deep within all life exists an ancient urge, the desire to connect. Perhaps that is why nature created birdsong, brilliant feathers, mating dances, and strange crests upon dinosaur heads, not only for survival, but for communication. If we could travel back to a morning within a primordial forest, perhaps that world would not feel silent at all. Between thick mist, covering giant ancient trees, sounds echo everywhere. Insects, creatures moving through wet leaves, and deep calls resonating across prehistoric valleys. Many dinosaurs may have used sound to communicate with one another. Some scientists believe the hollow crests of certain hadrosaurs functioned almost like natural instruments. Air passing through those hollow chambers could produce sounds, deep, resonant, and perhaps unique to each species. If that is true, then the world of dinosaurs was once filled with ancient songs, perhaps at twilight. Those calls echoed across prehistoric wetlands like voices from a lost world. According to Jung, sound touches the deepest layers of the unconscious, because before language, life already communicated through rhythm and sound. Perhaps that is why nighttime birds, ocean waves, or rainfall always awaken something primal within human beings. Dinosaurs may have lived within such a world of sound as well, not merely terrifying roars, but also mating calls, warning signals, and sounds helping herds locate one another within immense forests. Another fascinating detail is this: many dinosaurs possessed enormous crests or striking body structures. At first glance, these features seem impractical. Why would nature create such cumbersome shapes? But gradually, scientists realized they may have functioned as tools of communication. A large crest could help attract mates, identify members of the same species, or display health and status. And this makes dinosaurs feel remarkably close to modern birds. Today, peacocks spread their tails, deer display antlers, birds sing to attract mates. Perhaps tens of millions of years ago, dinosaurs did something very similar. According to Jung, the desire for recognition exists deeply within all social beings. Humans wear clothing, use symbols, alter their voices, and express themselves through art. Nature was doing something similar long before humanity appeared. Ancient crests may have been the visual language of prehistoric worlds. If we imagine a vast plain beneath reddish prehistoric twilight, perhaps somewhere dinosaurs walk slowly among their herds, crests reflecting the final light of day, low resonant calls vibrating through humid air. There is something incredibly beautiful about that image, because it reveals the dinosaur world was not merely violence and survival. It also contained display, ritual, and subtle social communication. According to Jung, every civilization begins with symbols. Perhaps nature functions similarly. A color, a sound, a movement, everything carries meaning. And perhaps most fascinating of all, some dinosaurs may have possessed extraordinary coloration. By studying melanosomes preserved within fossilized feathers, scientists have begun estimating the colors of certain prehistoric species. This changes the old image of dinosaurs as dull gray reptiles entirely. Perhaps many species once possessed iridescent feathers, unique the patterns, or colors shifting beneath changing light. Imagine that, a primordial forest where creatures shimmer with blue-black feathers, copper-red hues, or glowing patterns, moving through sunlight filtering across ancient leaves. That world was perhaps far more beautiful than humans once imagined. According to Jung, colors hold enormous symbolic power within the unconscious. They affect emotion before conscious thought even begins. Perhaps this was true for dinosaurs as well. Bright colors may have helped attract mates, warn rivals, or project strength. Even within prehistoric ages, life already knew how to express itself, and this makes dinosaurs feel strangely close to us, because beneath skin, feathers, and survival instincts, they also desired to be recognized, to connect, and to be chosen. According to Jung, one of humanity's deepest fears is that no one truly sees us. Perhaps that is why every social creature evolves methods of sending signals into the world around it. Dinosaurs may have done this through calls, colors, and strange structures upon their bodies. If we look deeply enough, this makes the dinosaur age feel less alien, not merely a world of teeth, claws, and killing, but also a world of communication, attraction, and ancient social rituals. Perhaps during prehistoric mating seasons, those forests once echoed with calls searching for mates, displays of dazzling color, and meaningful movements now lost except within human imagination. And that is beautiful, because it reminds us, even within the oldest worlds, life did not exist only to survive. It also existed to connect. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humanity imagines ancient calls echoing beneath star-filled prehistoric skies, we are not merely thinking about dinosaurs. We are listening to the distant echo of a truth that has never changed. Every living creature upon this planet, in every age, carries within itself the longing to be seen, to be heard, and to belong to something greater than itself. Part 17. Seasonal migration. Perhaps one of the oldest images ever etched into the memory of life on Earth is the image of migration. Great herds quietly leaving familiar lands, crossing vast plains, passing rivers, forests, and invisible pathways understood only through instinct. Today, humans still witness this among African wildebeest, whales crossing oceans, and birds flying across seasonal skies. But perhaps, tens of millions of years ago, dinosaurs did the same. They did not remain forever within fixed territories. Some species may have traveled hundreds of kilometers across ancient worlds searching for food, water, and survival. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, the journey is one of the deepest symbols within the human mind, because the unconscious understands life cannot remain forever within one unchanging place. Every creature must learn to move when the world changes. Perhaps that is why migration affects humans so deeply, because it reflects our own lives. A long journey through changing seasons of existence. If we traveled back into the dinosaur age and stood upon a vast plain at the beginning of dry season, perhaps we would watch the land itself beginning to change. Shallow waters shrinking, vegetation thinning, air becoming hotter and drier each day. And then, the herds begin moving. At first, only a few slow steps, but gradually, entire rivers of gigantic life begin crossing the planet. Adults walking along the outside, young protected at the center. Footsteps echoing across prehistoric ground, like the slow heartbeat of the ancient world itself. There is something sacred about that image. Not frantic escape, but a journey guided by instincts deeper than thought. According to Jung, human beings also carry an invisible map within the soul, a feeling that sometimes we must leave old places behind in order to continue growing. Dinosaurs perhaps carried something similar. No one taught them the roads. Nature itself had written those rhythms into their bodies across millions of years. Some scientists believe enormous herbivorous dinosaurs may have migrated seasonally, searching for fresh vegetation, reliable water, and safer breeding grounds. And this makes perfect sense. A gigantic body requires enormous amounts of food. If such creatures remained too long in one location, vegetation would eventually disappear. Movement became necessary for survival. Perhaps this is one of nature's deepest truths. All life must learn how to continue moving forward. According to Jung, much human suffering emerges when we cling too tightly to places, memories, or old versions of ourselves. But nature understands something humanity often forgets. Remaining still for too long can slowly become a form of death. Dinosaur herds survived because they moved alongside the changing rhythms of the planet. If we imagine those migrations at sunset, perhaps they would become one of the most beautiful scenes in the history of life. Red light spreading across hundreds of gigantic bodies slowly moving toward the horizon. Dust rising beneath heavy footsteps. Far away, seasonal storms forming along ancient skies. There is something deeply sad, yet hopeful within that image, because migration always carries two things: leaving behind and searching ahead. According to Jung, every journey of human growth works the same way. We must leave familiar worlds behind in order to move toward the unknown. Dinosaurs perhaps did this millions of years ago, not consciously, but through the instinct of life itself. What is fascinating is this: those migrations may have lasted incredibly long periods, weeks, months, across plains, primordial forests, swamps, and ancient rivers. And this makes the dinosaur world feel far more alive. No longer creatures frozen within imagination, but communities constantly moving with Earth's rhythms. Perhaps young were born during those journeys. Perhaps old individuals sometimes failed to keep pace with the herd. Nature has never been entirely gentle, yet it always continues moving. According to Jung, human life carries the same rhythm. No one remains forever within one season. There are seasons of growth, loss, change, and renewal. Migration is simply nature's adaptation to impermanence. If we look deeply enough, the journeys of dinosaurs were not merely searches for food. They were acts of harmony with the planet's heartbeat. When seasons changed, they changed. When water disappeared, they moved. Not resisting nature, but moving alongside it. Perhaps that is what gives ancient migrations such special beauty. According to Jung, modern humans often try to control everything: time, the future, even nature itself. But ancient dinosaur herds lived differently. They survived by listening to the world, skies, earth, rain seasons, and the scent of water carried through wind. There is something profoundly primal, yet peaceful in that way of living, as though life once understood its place within something far larger than itself. Some fossilized trackways suggest dinosaur herds may have traveled along familiar routes across many generations. That is astonishing, because it hints that the memory of journeys may have been passed along through instinct itself. Young dinosaurs followed older members of the herd, learning pathways toward water and vegetation. Perhaps that too was a form of nature's collective memory. According to Jung, the collective unconscious preserves ancient memories of life beyond any individual creature. Perhaps dinosaur migrations operated through something similar, a knowledge requiring no language, only feeling. If we imagine a night during one of those prehistoric migrations, perhaps the herd rests beneath star-filled skies. Night winds move across endless plains, young creatures sleeping close together near the center. Far away echo predators within darkness. But when dawn arrives, they continue moving once again, step by step, slowly, patiently, as though Earth itself were traveling through their bodies. Perhaps that is what makes this story so beautiful. It reminds humanity, all life is a journey. Nothing remains still forever. Seasons change, worlds change, and living creatures must learn how to keep walking alongside those changes. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humanity imagines dinosaur herds migrating silently across primordial plains beneath ancient stars, we are not merely thinking about prehistory, we are seeing ourselves. Creatures also trying to move through changing seasons of life, searching for places with enough light, water, and hope for the soul to continue surviving. Part 18. Footprints and Fossils Retelling the Past. Perhaps the strangest thing about dinosaur history is that even though they vanished tens of millions of years ago, their world has never become completely silent. Because Earth has a memory of its own, it preserves footprints pressed into ancient mud, bones buried deep beneath stone, and wounds never spoken aloud. Over time, every primordial forest disappeared. Every ancient call dissolved into the wind, yet the ground still remembers. And it is through those fragile traces that the story of a vanished world continues to be told. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings have always been haunted by memory, because deep within the unconscious, we fear being forgotten. Perhaps that is why fossils move us so deeply. They feel like proof that, no matter how far time drifts away, part of life always remains behind. If we could step into an ancient landscape just after rainfall tens of millions of years ago, perhaps we would see soft earth covered in footprints, large tracks pressed deep into the mud, smaller prints beside them, some footprints running quickly, others moving slowly and calmly. At first glance, they are only meaningless impressions upon the ground, but to scientists, they are stories. Footprints can reveal speed of movement, direction of travel, distance between steps, and even herd behavior. That is extraordinary, because for the first time, we are not merely seeing dinosaur bones. We are witnessing dinosaur life in motion. According to Jung, humans do not only want to know what once existed, we want to know how they lived, how they felt, and how they moved through the world. Ancient footprints touch people deeply because they feel personal. A skeleton reveals form, but a footprint reveals movement. It is like a frozen moment suspended within time itself. If we imagine a herd of dinosaurs crossing wet ground after ancient rain, perhaps the young walked close beside the adults, small footprints resting between larger ones, and this suggests many species may have traveled together and protected their young during migration. There is something deeply emotional in that image, because even after tens of millions of years, the Earth still remembers the way they once walked beside one another. According to Jung, the strongest symbols often require no words. A small footprint beside a larger one, he already tells a story of protection, community, and the instinct to care for life. Perhaps that is why fossils are not merely science, they are memory. Another remarkable thing is this: footprints also reveal the primitive emotions of life itself. Some tracks appear frantic, as though the animal was fleeing in panic. Some move steadily and calmly. Some suddenly disappear where ancient ground collapsed or water swept them away. Perhaps in that moment, a prehistoric creature was escaping danger, searching for food, or simply walking through an ordinary afternoon in the ancient world. According to Jung, humanity always finds itself within traces of the past, because the deeper we look into the history of life, the more we realize all creatures experience the same things: survival, fear, movement, and the struggle to continue through time. But perhaps the most moving part of fossils lies within the bones themselves, not merely because they reveal physical form, but because they preserve pain. Many dinosaur skeletons carry evidence of broken bones, arthritis, injuries from combat, or wounds healed across many years. And this changes the way humans see dinosaurs completely. They are no longer emotionless biological machines. They were injured, they suffered, they continued living with imperfect bodies. Perhaps this is the part that makes their story feel closest to humanity. According to Jung, pain is inseparable from the journey of life. No creature matures without carrying wounds. And strangely, even after tens of millions of years, those ancient bones still speak about the struggle of a creature long vanished. A healed fracture tells us it survived long enough for recovery, which means it endured. Perhaps its herd protected it during weakness. Perhaps it walked more slowly through many seasons of pain. There is something profoundly human about this, because every person carries their own fossilized wounds, old memories, losses, and pains that healed without ever fully disappearing. According to Jung, maturity does not mean becoming unbroken. It means learning how to continue living with the cracks inside us. Dinosaurs perhaps did the same. Some fossils show severe arthritis. Imagine that, a gigantic creature moving slowly across ancient plains, carrying pain within its body through every step, yet still continuing forward, still surviving. There is something very sad, yet beautiful in that image, because it reminds us life does not demand perfection. It only asks continuation. According to Jung, modern humans often try to hide vulnerability, but nature never did. Ancient bones remain marked by collisions, fractures, and healing, as though Earth itself were whispering. Every creature that lives long enough will carry scars. What is astonishing is this: from only footprints and fragments of bone, humanity can reconstruct entire vanished worlds. Paleontologists are like listeners to the memory of the planet. They study the spacing between steps, the angle of bones, or bite marks upon fossils, and slowly begin to see again ancient hunts, migrations, or battles between creatures dead for tens of millions of years. According to Jung, humans always search for meaning within traces, perhaps because the unconscious understands nothing truly disappears completely. Every life leaves marks upon the world somehow. Dinosaurs vanished, yet their footprints remain inside stone. Their wounds remain upon bones, and their stories continue across time. If we imagine a quiet night where scientists stand within desert excavation sites beneath star-filled skies, perhaps the strongest feeling would not be excitement, but humility, because beneath ancient rock lies the memory of a world once as alive as ours. A creature once walked there, once suffered, once survived, and eventually disappeared, but not entirely. According to Jung, the collective memory of life never fully vanishes. It survives within fossils, symbols, and human imagination. Perhaps that is why ancient footprints still fascinate us, because when we look at them, we do not only see the past, we see ourselves, a small creature also leaving traces upon this planet, through footsteps, through wounds, and through stories that time will someday preserve in its own mysterious way. Part 19. Fossilized droppings and stomach stones. Perhaps one of the strangest things about science is that sometimes the greatest secrets of the ancient world are preserved within the smallest and most ordinary things imaginable. Not always. Gigantic skeletons, sharp teeth, or fossils of violent hunts. Sometimes, the most ordinary parts of life tell the truest stories. A fragment of fossilized dung, a handful of stones once resting inside the stomach of a creature dead for tens of millions of years. At first, that sounds almost absurd, yet those tiny details open entire lost worlds. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, human beings often search for meaning in grand things. Kings, wars, enormous creatures. But the true soul of life sometimes hides within very small things, a simpler trace, an everyday habit. Perhaps that is what makes fossilized droppings and stomach stones so extraordinary. They do not tell stories of legend, they tell stories of living. If we could return to the age of dinosaurs and stand upon an ancient plain during early morning, perhaps the scene would look very different from humanity's dramatic imagination. Not constant hunting or battle. Most of the time, life was simply eating, moving, resting, and surviving another day. A herd of herbivorous dinosaurs slowly crossing wet vegetation after rain, long necks lowering toward branches, the sound of leaves being crushed, echoing steadily through humid prehistoric air. And then, with time, what they consumed passed through their bodies and became waste, something entirely ordinary. Yet in rare cases, nature preserved even those traces across millions of years. Fossilized droppings, strange as it sounds, to scientists, they are like ancient diaries, because inside them remain traces of plants, tiny bones, fish scales, and chemical remnants of ancient meals. And this allows humans to understand what a creature once ate. There is something deeply moving in that idea, that even the most ordinary aspect of an ancient creature's life eventually becomes the key to understanding it. According to Jung, humans often forget, life is not built only from grand moments, but from repeated daily acts, eating, moving, searching for survival. Dinosaurs lived that way too. What is fascinating is this. Fossilized dung reveals that ancient ecosystems were far more complex than we imagined. Some herbivores consumed many plant species. Some predators swallowed both flesh and bone. Some creatures ate fish, others soft leaves, others tough fibrous vegetation. Each tiny trace tells a story about survival strategy. If we imagine an ancient primordial forest, perhaps every species carried its own role within the ecosystem, some feeding high among trees, some grazing low vegetation, some hunting within water, some hunting upon land. Nature has never been pure chaos. It is a vast, interconnected balance, where every creature is linked through food and survival. According to Jung, the unconscious constantly searches for structure and meaning. Perhaps that is why even something as simple as fossilized dung still amazes humanity, because from what seems worthless, an entire world emerges. But perhaps even stranger than fossilized droppings are stomach stones. Some herbivorous dinosaurs swallowed small stones intentionally. At first, this sounds irrational. Why would an animal eat rocks? But the answer is remarkably intelligent. Many ancient herbivores did not chew food thoroughly like modern mammals. Instead, stones within the stomach helped grind vegetation as muscles contracted. Those stones functioned like natural grinding tools inside the body. That is extraordinary, because nature always discovers ways for life to adapt. According to Jung, true wisdom does not always emerge from complexity. Sometimes, it exists within the simplest solutions, a stone inside the belly of a giant creature, yet helping it survive across millions of years. If we imagine an enormous sauropod crossing ancient land, perhaps inside that gigantic body dozens of stones shifted gently with every step. Each time it fed, those stones silently crushed tough vegetation so nutrients could be absorbed. No one saw them. No one recognized their importance within that age. Yet they worked quietly every single day. There is something profoundly meaningful about that image. According to Jung, many things that sustain life are invisible and silent. Humans tend to notice roaring, power, and spectacle. But sometimes, small, unnoticed things sustain entire worlds. A tiny stone inside a stomach, a repeated habit, a simple mechanism that works. Nature functions through such things, and this makes dinosaurs feel surprisingly close to humanity. Because whether giant prehistoric creatures or modern humans, all life depends upon ordinary processes: eating, digestion, rest, and transforming energy into continued existence. According to Jung, modern humanity often obsesses over the extraordinary, but nature reminds us, most beauty within life exists inside ordinary cycles. Dinosaurs did not survive hundreds of millions of years through mystical miracles. They survived through practical systems: food, adaptation, and the ability to use resources around them. If we look deeply enough, Fossilized droppings and stomach stones carry another meaning as well. They reveal nothing in nature is truly meaningless. Even waste eventually becomes data, preserving the memory of the planet. According to Jung, the unconscious works similarly. The things humans try to forget sometimes become the key to understanding themselves. Nature does not entirely discard anything. It preserves, through rock, through earth, through fossils. Perhaps that is what makes dinosaur science feel almost meditative, because the deeper humanity digs into the past, the more we realize every part of life is connected. A leaf eaten, a stone swallowed, a trace left in soil, and then tens of millions of years later, another creature called humanity bends down, lifts those fragments from the earth, and tries to understand the story that once unfolded upon this planet. There is something incredibly beautiful in that circle, as though Earth is always telling stories, only in the language of stone and time, and perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humanity imagines dinosaur herds slowly feeding beneath ancient skies, carrying tiny stones inside their bodies, silently helping life continue. We are not merely thinking about prehistory, we are witnessing one of the deepest truths of existence. That sometimes the smallest, quietest, and most ordinary things are the very forces that keep entire worlds moving forward across millions of years. Part 20. Feathers and Ancient Colors. For a very long time, humanity may have imagined the dinosaur world incorrectly. We once believed they were creatures, gray-skinned, rough, heavy, and almost colorless. A prehistoric world covered in mud and shadow. But then, fossils began telling another story, a softer story, a stranger story, and a far more beautiful one. Because tens of millions of years ago, the dinosaur world may have been filled with feathers, shimmering colors, and creatures whose beauty resembled modern birds far more than we once imagined. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, humans have always been fascinated by color and form, because within the unconscious, colors are not merely visual experiences, they are emotions. Red may evoke passion, danger, or vitality. Black may suggest mystery, depth, and primordial darkness. Perhaps that is why discovering feathers and colors upon dinosaurs transformed the ancient world so dramatically. Suddenly, they were no longer stone monsters, but living creatures once walking beneath prehistoric sunlight. If we could return to a primordial forest tens of millions of years ago, perhaps what would astonish us most would not be size, but beauty. Sunlight filtering through ancient leaves, reflecting upon dark iridescent feathers of a small creature gliding through branches. Farther away, copper-red stripes stretching along the body of a small predator, air filled with insect sounds, and the scent of wet vegetation after rain. There is something almost mythical about that image, as though nature once painted a world modern humans never truly imagined correctly. For many years, scientists believed feathers belonged only to birds, but fossils changed everything. Some fossils were preserved in such detail that individual feather structures remained visible, and this revelation shocked the scientific world, because it showed many dinosaurs possessed feathers long before modern birds appeared. Perhaps feathers were not originally for flight at all, but for warmth, display, or attracting mates. According to Jung, every profound transformation begins with something small. A tiny change can eventually reshape the entire future of life. Feathers may have begun the same way. At first, merely simple structures upon ancient bodies, but over millions of years, they became wings. And that is beautiful, because it reminds us, every miracle begins as something fragile. If we imagine creatures like Microraptor or Archaeopteryx within ancient forests, perhaps their feathers trembled softly in morning wind, not fully like modern birds, yet already carrying the first promise of the sky. According to Jung, wings have always symbolized freedom, transformation, and rising beyond old limitations. Perhaps that is why discovering feathers upon dinosaurs affects humanity so deeply, because it reveals even creatures that seemed impossibly heavy carried within themselves the potential to become lighter and freer. But perhaps even more extraordinary is color. For a long time, humans believed no one could ever know dinosaur coloration, because color usually disappears through time. But modern science discovered melanosomes, microscopic pigment structures within feathers and skin, and astonishingly, some fossils still preserve them. By comparing those structures with modern birds, scientists began estimating the colors of ancient creatures. Perhaps some species possessed glossy black feathers, some carried reddish-brown patterns, while others displayed camouflage among prehistoric forests. Suddenly the dinosaur world became vivid like a painting, no longer a gray and lifeless planet, but a world overflowing with color beneath ancient sunlight. According to Jung, colors possess immense psychological power. Humans use color to attract, warn, undunt, express identity, and shape meaning. Dinosaurs perhaps did the same. Bright feathers may have helped attract mates, intimidate rivals, or blend into environments. Even within prehistoric worlds, life already understood how to communicate through beauty. If we imagine an ancient forest at dawn, perhaps it would be filled with soft feathered movements beneath pale golden light, small creatures shimmering blue-black through branches, young predators carrying reddish stripes hidden among giant ferns. There is something deeply poetic in that image, because it transforms dinosaurs from symbols of brute strength into part of nature's beauty. According to Jung, humans unconsciously divide the world into opposites: beauty and terror, softness and strength. But nature never separates them so neatly. A creature can be dangerous, beautiful, is wild, and delicate at the same time. Dinosaurs perhaps embodied that combination perfectly. What is especially fascinating is this: feathers also changed how scientists understood dinosaur metabolism. If many dinosaurs possessed feathers, then perhaps they were active, warm-blooded, and far more bird-like than reptilian. In other words, dinosaurs may have been far more energetic, intelligent, and vividly alive than earlier generations imagined. And perhaps that is what makes the prehistoric world increasingly magical. The more humans study it, the more they realize the past was never simple. It was vibrant, colorful, and overflowing with life. According to Jung, the human unconscious longs to reconnect with primal nature. Perhaps that is why discovering ancient colors feels so emotional, because for the first time, dinosaurs no longer appear merely as white skeletons inside museums. They seem alive again, colored, feathered, beautiful beneath the sunlight of lost worlds. If we look deeply enough, the story of feathers carries an even larger meaning. It reveals there are no absolute boundaries in nature. Birds did not appear suddenly. They are the continuation of a long evolutionary journey. What today seems ordinary and small once began among ancient creatures walking through primordial forests. According to Jung, every deep transformation unfolds slowly. Humans change the same way. We do not become new versions of ourselves overnight. We transform little by little, like feathers gradually becoming wings, like earthbound creatures slowly learning how to fly. Perhaps that is the most beautiful part of this story. Nature is patient. It does not rush perfection. It experiments, changes, and slowly transforms impossible dreams into reality. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humanity imagines feathered creatures gliding through ancient forests beneath colors, Earth concealed for tens of millions of years, we are not merely thinking about dinosaurs. We are witnessing one of the deepest truths of life itself, that even within the wildest worlds, nature has always quietly created beauty, color, and extraordinary transformations far beyond human imagination. Part 21. The Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods. Perhaps when humans speak about the age of dinosaurs, we often imagine it as a single world, a planet covered with primordial forests, gigantic creatures, and the echo of heavy footsteps across ancient ground. But the truth is far more extraordinary, because the age of dinosaurs was not a brief moment. It lasted hundreds of millions of years, a span of time so immense that mountains changed, oceans shifted, climates transformed, and entire ecosystems became completely different worlds many times over. Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. These are not merely geological periods. They are like three different dreams dreamed by Earth itself. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, the human mind tends to imagine time as a straight line, but the unconscious experiences time as cycles: birth, growth, transformation, and ending. Perhaps that is why Earth's history feels almost mythological, because each age resembles a stage in the maturation of the planet itself. If we could travel back to the Triassic period, more than 200 million years ago, Earth would look profoundly unfamiliar to modern humanity. The continents were still joined together in the gigantic supercontinent known as Pangaea. Much of the climate was hotter and drier. Vast deserts stretched beneath dusty red skies. And within that harsh world, the first dinosaurs began to appear. Not the giants of modern films, but smaller, faster creatures still fragile before nature. There is something deeply beautiful about that image, because even the beings that would one day dominate Earth once began with small, uncertain footsteps. According to Jung, every great journey begins in incompleteness. Humans are the same. We are not born strong. We become ourselves gradually through time and transformation. Dinosaurs too passed through such a beginning during the Triassic. The world then was filled with instability, volcanic eruptions, brutal climates, and fierce competition among ancient life forms. Yet within that chaos, new forms of life emerged. Perhaps this is one of nature's deepest truths. It often creates new possibilities during times of greatest uncertainty. If the Triassic resembled childhood for the age of dinosaurs, then the Jurassic felt like vigorous maturity. When people hear the word Jurassic, we often imagine lush green forests, mist drifting across primordial plains, and gigantic creatures moving through living wilderness. And this image is not entirely wrong. During the Jurassic, Earth became warmer and wetter in many regions. Forests flourished, plant life spread across the planet. And then, the giants arrived. Massive sauropods with necks like living bridges crossed ancient lands. Stegosaurus carried towering plates along its spine. Large predators rose to dominate ecosystems. There is something dreamlike about the Jurassic world, a green and breathing planet overflowing with life. If we imagine morning within a Jurassic forest, perhaps sunlight would filter through dense mist covering ancient trees. Insects would hum endlessly. Far away, the slow footsteps of migrating sauropods would echo through humid air rich with vegetation. Earth itself might have felt like a living creature breathing deeply. According to Jung, the unconscious mind is always drawn toward the image of the primordial forest, because forests symbolize the unknown, the unconscious, and the hidden depths of life. The Jurassic seems like the planetary embodiment of that symbol, a world where nature expanded almost without limits. But then, time continued moving, and the Cretaceous arrived. If the Jurassic carried the feeling of flourishing growth, then the Cretaceous resembled a world of immense complexity and diversity. Dinosaurs became more varied than ever before. Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, Velociraptor, Ankylosaurus, and countless other strange creatures. Flowering plants spread across Earth. Insects evolved alongside blooming vegetation. Ecosystems became increasingly intricate. In many ways, the Cretaceous represented the peak of the dinosaur age. Yet strangely, peaks often stand closest to endings. According to Jung, life always moves in cycles. No spring lasts forever. Every age begins, grows powerful, and eventually transforms. The Cretaceous was no exception. If we imagine the world near the end of that period, perhaps Earth would appear radiant with color, feathered dinosaurs, flowering forests, creatures gliding across ancient skies. That world may have been far more beautiful than humanity once imagined. And then, the Chicxulub impact occurred, and an entire age ended. There is something profoundly sad about this, because the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous were not merely geological chapters, they were complete worlds. Each possessed different skies, different climates, different sounds, and living creatures never repeated again in Earth's history. According to Jung, one of humanity's deepest sorrows comes from understanding everything is impermanent. Even ages lasting hundreds of millions of years eventually vanish. But perhaps that impermanence is precisely what makes them beautiful, because the greatest beauty often belongs to things that cannot last forever. If we look deeply enough, the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous resemble three great movements within Earth's own coming-of-age story. The Triassic was the beginning, harsh, chaotic, yet filled with possibility. The Jurassic was flourishing, powerful, green, and overflowing with vitality. The Cretaceous was culmination, diverse, sophisticated, and radiant before its ending. According to Jung, human life unfolds through similar cycles. We experience youthful experimentation, periods of powerful growth, and mature seasons before eventually releasing what once defined us. Perhaps this is why Earth's history touches humans so deeply, because when we look at the planet, we are also seeing our own lives reflected on a far greater scale. And the remarkable thing is this: though those ages are gone, traces of them still remain, in stone, in fossils, and in the birds singing outside modern windows. Part of the Jurassic survives within morning birdsong. Part of the Cretaceous still exists in feathers trembling softly in the wind. According to Jung, nothing ever truly disappears. Life merely changes form. Perhaps that is the most beautiful truth, hidden within the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. They do not simply describe the past. They remind us, Earth is always changing, always dreaming new dreams, and always creating new worlds through the endless flow of time. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humans imagine those three ancient ages unfolding one after another beneath the changing skies of a young planet, we are not merely thinking about dinosaur history. We are listening to the deep breathing of Earth itself, a vast living being, also passing through seasons of growth, transformation, and rebirth, just like every life form that has ever existed upon its surface. Part 22. The breakup of Pangaea. Perhaps one of the hardest things to imagine about Earth is that the continents humans know today were once not separated at all. There was no Atlantic Ocean, vast seas dividing lands, or enormous distances between continents. Long before humanity appeared, all land on Earth was joined into one immense supercontinent, Pangaea, a primordial world where deserts stretched for thousands of kilometers, ancient forests covered humid regions, and creatures could walk across lands now separated by oceans. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, humans often believe the world around them is fixed. We look at mountains, oceans, and continents, and assume they have always existed exactly as they are now. But nature has never stood still. Even the ground beneath our feet is moving slowly through millions of years. Perhaps that is why the story of Pangaea feels almost mythical, because it reminds us everything changes, even the things that appear eternal. If we could travel back, more than 200 million years, and view Earth from space, the sight would astonish modern humanity. No separated continents like today's maps. Instead, one colossal landmass, surrounded by ancient oceans, Pangaea, a world where North America once touched Africa. Antarctica was not isolated at the southern pole, and lands now separated by thousands of kilometers once belonged to the same planetary body. There is something deeply moving in that image, as though Earth itself was once whole, before time slowly pulled it apart. According to Jung, the unconscious mind carries a longing for primordial unity. Humans constantly search for connection, belonging, and a lost sense of wholeness. Perhaps that is why Pangaea affects the imagination so deeply. It resembles an ancient memory of a world before separation. But then, Earth began to change. Deep beneath seemingly motionless stone, tectonic plates moved slowly, so slowly that no creature living then could possibly notice. Yet across millions of years, that movement split the supercontinent apart. The first fractures appeared. Magma rose from deep within Earth. New oceans slowly opened between lands once joined together. Pangaea began to break apart. There is something very sorrowful in that idea. A world once united, drifting forever into separation. According to Jung, every process of growth involves division. Humans experience the same thing. We begin life in complete unity with the world around us. But growing up means leaving what is familiar, entering separateness, and learning how to exist within divided realities. Perhaps Pangaea experienced a similar journey on a planetary scale, and remarkably, that separation transformed the entire history of life. As continents drifted apart, climates changed, new ocean currents formed, winds shifted direction. Some regions became drier, others became lush and humid. Earth began creating entirely different climatic worlds. According to Jung, outer change always creates inner change. Nature works the same way. When the land changes, life must adapt. A species thriving easily in one environment may no longer survive there, yet elsewhere, entirely new creatures begin to emerge. If we imagine Earth while continents slowly drifted apart, perhaps the planet would seem constantly in motion, mountains rising, oceans flooding, widening rifts, and ancient lands slowly drifting away from one another across millions of years. No dramatic sound announced this transformation, only change so gradual it became almost invisible. There is something deeply human about that. According to Jung, the most profound transformations rarely happen instantly. They unfold quietly, through years, through experience, and through small shifts only recognized much later. Pangaea separated in exactly that way, not through sudden destruction, but through slow, irreversible movement guided by time itself. The breakup of continents also transformed migration. When lands remained connected, many species could travel enormous distances. But as oceans widened, populations became isolated, and then evolution changed everything. One lineage on one continent developed in its own direction. Another on distant lands evolved into entirely different forms. In many ways, the fragmentation of Pangaea helped create the astonishing diversity of life that followed. According to Jung, individuality often emerges through distance and separation. If everything remained permanently unified, a difference could never arise. Perhaps nature follows the same principle. When continents separated, life began telling many different stories, and something beautiful remains. Traces of Pangaea still survive today. Scientists discovered identical fossils upon distant continents, mountain ranges matching across oceans, and geological layers once connected long ago. As though even after hundreds of millions of years apart, Earth still remembers when everything was one. According to Jung, the human unconscious behaves similarly. Even though life separates us into memories and worlds, and different versions of ourselves. Deep beneath all of it remains an original wholeness. Perhaps that is why the story of Pangaea feels almost meditative, because it is not only about geology, it is about unity, separation, and transformation. If we look deeply enough, the breakup of Pangaea was not a tragedy. It was necessary for the world to continue evolving. If the supercontinent had never divided, perhaps climate would be different, evolution would be different, and humanity might never have appeared at all. According to Jung, losing an old unity is sometimes necessary for life to mature into something new. This is true for planets, nature, matter, and the human soul. Humans often grieve change, yet sometimes separation creates possibilities that never existed before. If we imagine Earth viewed from space across millions of years, perhaps the continents resemble enormous fragments of memory, slowly drifting apart across deep blue oceans, not hurried, not stopping, simply continuing their movement according to the deep rhythm of the planet. There is something very peaceful in that image, as though Earth has always known. All life must change form in order to continue. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humans imagine the ancient supercontinent slowly breaking apart beneath the stars of young Earth, we are not merely thinking about geology or dinosaurs. We are seeing life itself, a journey where every unity eventually changes, every familiar thing eventually drifts away, and where those slow movements ultimately create all the beautiful diversity of the world we inhabit today. Part 23. Dinosaurs of the Polar Regions. Perhaps, when humans think of Antarctica, we imagine endless ice and snow, pale winds sweeping across white emptiness, and a land so silent it feels like the edge of the world. But the strange thing is, Antarctica was not always like this. Long before humanity existed, before ice buried the white continent beneath frozen silence, Antarctica once held forests, rivers, and gigantic creatures walking across ancient landscapes. Among them were dinosaurs. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, humans often believe the world around them is permanent. We assume polar regions are always cold, deserts are always dry, and oceans have always rested where they are today. But nature has never been still. Earth is a living system constantly transforming through deep time. Perhaps that is why the story of dinosaurs in Antarctica feels almost mystical, because it reminds us, even the coldest places on Earth today were once filled with life. If we could travel back tens of millions of years and stand upon the land now called Antarctica, the scene would look nothing like the modern imagination. No endless white ice. Instead, there would be ancient forests, towering ferns, cold rivers, and long summer light beneath primordial skies. The air would be cooler than tropical regions, yet still warm enough for thriving ecosystems. Far away, ancient creatures would move through wet vegetation. Dinosaurs once lived there. The idea sounds almost impossible, yet fossils tell exactly that story. Scientists discovered dinosaur bones, fossilized plants, and entire fossil forests buried beneath modern Antarctic ice. There is something both sorrowful and beautiful in that image. A forest once alive with movement, now sleeping beneath kilometers of frozen silence. According to Jung, the human unconscious is deeply haunted by the idea of lost worlds. Because somewhere deep within the mind, we understand, everything changes. And even places once overflowing with life may eventually become silent. Perhaps that is why ancient Antarctica touches the imagination so deeply. It feels like a buried memory of the planet itself. If we imagine a summer morning in Antarctica during the dinosaur age, perhaps the light would feel strange. Near the poles, there are seasons when the sun barely sets at all. Pale golden light would stretch across ancient forests for endless hours. Thin mist would drift between towering trees. Insects would hum softly through cool air. And then, a herd of dinosaurs would slowly cross that landscape. Not every dinosaur lived in hot tropical swamps as humans once imagined. Some adapted to colder climates and dramatic seasonal light. This reveals something extraordinary. Life is far more flexible than old assumptions believed. According to Jung, one of life's greatest powers is adaptation. Humans are the same. We survive through loss, change, and emotional winters we once believed impossible to endure. Polar dinosaurs symbolize exactly that. They learned to live where light changed dramatically. Winters stretched long, and climates differed completely from much of ancient Earth. This makes the dinosaur world feel far larger and more complex. Not only humid swamps or tropical forests, but also cold lands where life continued beneath dim polar sunlight. Perhaps that is one of nature's deepest beauties. It always finds a way to continue. If we look deeply enough, ancient Antarctica tells an even greater story about Earth itself, because the fact that forests once existed there means planetary climate has transformed enormously through time. Today, Antarctica symbolizes frozen emptiness, but millions of years ago, it was green. According to Jung, one of the most unsettling truths for humans is realizing nothing remains fixed forever. Even mountains, oceans, and ice change through time. Yet perhaps that constant transformation is precisely what makes Earth alive. The planet is not a motionless stone drifting through space. It is a system constantly breathing, moving, and transforming. The fossil forests beneath Antarctica resemble frozen memories of the planet. Petrified tree trunks lie silently beneath white ice, as though time itself has fallen asleep there. There is something profoundly meditative about that image. A forest once filled with wind, insects, and ancient creatures now survives only as quiet traces beneath frozen silence. According to Jung, the human unconscious resembles ancient Antarctica. Beneath layers of memory and emotional ice, old forests still remain, feelings, dreams, and forgotten parts of the soul. Perhaps that is why fossils from the polar regions feel so moving, because they remind us what is lost is never entirely gone. It remains there, silent, waiting to be rediscovered. Another remarkable question is this: polar dinosaurs may have endured long, dark winters. Scientists still wonder how they adapted. Some may have migrated, possessed insulating feathers, or followed unique seasonal rhythms. This makes the ancient world feel far more alive and realistic, because survival is not only about strength, it is also about adapting to the changing rhythms of the world. According to Jung, human maturity works the same way. The strongest do not always survive. Sometimes, those who adapt continue furthest. Ancient Antarctica is proof of that truth on a planetary scale. If we imagine winter in the polar regions during the dinosaur age, perhaps forests would sink into dim blue-gray light. The air would grow colder. Wind would move through ancient trees. Small creatures would search for shelter. And somewhere within cold, drifting mist, an ancient animal would still continue walking through a changing world. There is something lonely yet beautiful about that image, because it reveals life continues, even in places that seem impossibly harsh. According to Jung, within darkness there is always the possibility of renewal. Perhaps that is the story ancient Antarctica tells, that beneath today's frozen silence, there once existed green forests, warm light, and living creatures dreaming in their own ancient ways. If we look deeply enough, the story of dinosaurs at the poles is not merely science. It is a gentle reminder that the world is always larger than human imagination. Places now frozen were once full of life. Landscapes that seem eternal were once entirely different. And perhaps humans are the same. We are not as fixed as we believe. Deep within, every person remains the ability to change, adapt, and begin again through different seasons of life. And perhaps during the quietest nights, when humans imagine ancient forests sleeping beneath Antarctic ice, where dinosaurs once walked under pale polar sunlight, we are not only thinking about Earth's past, we are listening to a deeper truth, that even the coldest and quietest places once carried life, memory, and the green dreams of an ancient world. Part 24. Pterosaurs, creatures of the sky. Long before humans ever looked upward and dreamed of flying, Earth already belonged to creatures that glided through the sky. Not birds, not bats, but strange ancient beings with wings of stretched skin drifting above the prehistoric world. Pterosaur. They were not dinosaurs, yet they lived beside dinosaurs, and for millions of years, the primordial skies of Earth belonged to them. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, flight has always been one of humanity's deepest symbols. Flight represents freedom, transcendence, and the longing to rise beyond earthly limits. Perhaps that is why humans are endlessly fascinated by flying creatures. Because deep within the unconscious, we too dream of escaping gravity. If we could travel back to the dinosaur age and stand upon an ancient cliff, overlooking primordial oceans, perhaps the most astonishing thing would not be the land below, but the sky itself. Enormous shadows would glide through red evening light. Wind would tremble across thin membranous wings. Ancient flyers would circle slowly upon warm air currents above prehistoric seas. Pterosaurs, some as small as modern seabirds, others with wingspans larger than small aircraft. There is something almost surreal about that image, because before modern birds ever existed, nature had already experimented with the dream of flight. For many years, humans mistakenly imagined pterosaurs as flying dinosaurs, but in truth, they belonged to an entirely separate branch of evolution. Not dinosaurs, yet close relatives living beside them. This makes the ancient world even stranger, because not only the land belonged to giants, even the skies had rulers of their own. According to Jung, humans instinctively divide existence into layers: earth, ocean, and sky. Each symbolizes a different dimension of the psyche. If oceans represent the deep unconscious, then the sky often symbolizes aspiration, spirit, and transcendence beyond material life. Perhaps that is why pterosaurs feel almost mythological. They resemble creatures emerging from Earth's oldest dreams. If we imagine an afternoon during the Jurassic or Cretaceous, perhaps pterosaurs would glide above primordial forests, wetlands, and oceans filled with ancient life. Some skimmed the sea surface hunting fish like modern seabirds. Others soared above landscapes, searching for carrion or small prey. The ancient atmosphere must have been filled with movement. Insects humming, dinosaurs calling below, and gigantic wings crossing the sun. There is something profoundly free in that image. According to Jung, freedom is one of the soul's oldest longings. Yet true freedom is not escaping the world. It is learning to move harmoniously within it. Pterosaurs seem to embody that truth. They did not fight the air. They moved with the wind itself. One of the most astonishing things about pterosaurs is this: nature created their wings completely differently from birds. Not feathers, but membranes of skin stretched from the body to enormously elongated fingers. Their wings resembled, but wings, yet stranger and vastly larger. If one watched a pterosaur crossing ancient skies, the sensation would feel very different from observing modern birds. Not quick and delicate, but immense, ancient, and difficult to describe, as though the sky itself were moving. According to Jung, primordial images often feel sacred, not because they are supernatural, but because they touch the deepest layers of human imagination. Pterosaurs may have been one of those images, creatures simultaneously, terrifying, beautiful, strange, and free, and some were enormous beyond belief. Quetzalcoatlus, among the largest flying animals ever known, possessed wingspans so immense that modern humans struggle to believe such creatures could fly at all. To stand near one might feel like witnessing living mythology. A colossal shadow covering the ground, the violent rush of wind as wings unfolded, then the body gradually lifting into ancient air. There is something deeply moving about that moment, because flight has always symbolized transcendence. According to Jung, the human soul constantly longs to rise beyond fear, limitation, and emotional heaviness. Perhaps that is why dreams of flying appear within so many unconscious minds. Pterosaurs made that dream real tens of millions of years ago. Yet strangely, despite ruling the skies for ages, they too vanished. Nature keeps no species forever, not even masters of the air. According to Jung, all power is impermanent. Every age eventually passes. This gives the story of pterosaurs a uniquely melancholy beauty, because they once crossed primordial skies, witnessed ancient oceans, and lived millions of years before humanity. And now, only fossils remain within stone. If we look deeply enough, pterosaurs do not merely tell the story of flight. They reveal life's endless desire to transcend itself. Nature experimented with legs for running, fins for swimming, and wings for flight. Each became part of evolution's vast journey. According to Jung, humans are the same. We continually attempt to rise beyond older versions of ourselves through understanding, creativity, and dreams. Perhaps that is why flying creatures move humanity so deeply, because they reflect the hidden longing inside the soul to become lighter, higher, and freer. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humans imagine ancient flyers silently crossing primordial skies beneath the stars of young Earth, we are not merely thinking about pterosaurs. We are seeing a profound part of ourselves, the desire to rise above the gravity of fear and touch the vast open freedom waiting above life itself. Part 25. Ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs. Perhaps when humans think about the age of dinosaurs, we instinctively look toward land, toward primordial forests, gigantic creatures crossing plains and roaring beneath ancient skies. But while dinosaurs ruled the continents, another world existed beside them. A deeper world, a darker world, and far more mysterious. The ancient oceans, where gigantic marine reptiles ruled the shadows beneath the sea. Ichthyosaur, mosasaur, not dinosaurs, but ancient marine reptiles dominating Earth's oceans for millions of years. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, the ocean has always symbolized the deep unconscious of the human mind, because the sea is vast, dark, and filled with unseen things. Perhaps that is why ancient marine creatures feel different from land animals. They resemble primordial dreams moving beneath black water. If we could stand beside a prehistoric ocean during the Jurassic or Cretaceous, at sunset, the sea surface might appear calm, gentle waves reflecting pale red light, wind moving across endless water. But below, another world lived entirely. Gigantic shadows moved silently through deep water. Ancient predators glided beneath primordial seas. There is something terrifying, yet hypnotic about that image, because oceans always make humans feel small. According to Jung, the unconscious resembles the sea. We only see the surface. Most of life exists beneath it. Perhaps that is why ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs touch the imagination so deeply. They represent the most ancient and mysterious dimensions of the planet itself. Ichthyosaurs were among the strangest marine creatures ever to exist. At first glance, they resembled modern dolphins, streamlined bodies, huge eyes, perfectly adapted for speed underwater. Yet they were not fish, they were reptiles. And that is extraordinary, because nature repeatedly creates similar forms through entirely different evolutionary paths. According to Jung, very different things sometimes move towards similar shapes because they seek the same balance. Nature behaves similarly. to move swiftly through oceans, life gradually creates bodies that are streamlined, flexible, and powerful against water currents. Ichthyosaurs became perfect embodiments of that principle. If we imagine an ichthyosaur hunting within prehistoric seas, its movement would appear graceful. No loud violence, no chaos, only a body gliding through dark blue water as though carried by the ocean itself. Sunlight would filter down from above. Schools of ancient fish would scatter in panic. Then the great shadow would accelerate. There is something almost poetic about that image. Because oceans move differently from land, everything underwater feels slower, softer, and dreamlike. According to Jung, water symbolizes the deepest layers of the psyche. Perhaps that is why ancient sea creatures simultaneously frighten and fascinate humans. Because when we look at them, we glimpse ancient darkness within ourselves. And then, another predator emerged, mosasaurs. If ichthyosaurs resembled swift ghosts of the sea, mosasaurs felt like the ancient nightmare of the oceans. Long bodies, rows of sharp teeth, power enough to dominate the seas at the end of the dinosaur age. Some species grew longer than modern buses. If a mosasaur surfaced beside prehistoric waters, perhaps every nearby creature would fall silent. According to Jung, nearly every culture creates sea monsters within mythology, because oceans symbolize the unknown, and humans fear what hides beneath water beyond sight. Mosasaurs may have been real embodiments of that primordial fear. Yet strangely, however terrifying they appear, they were also profoundly beautiful parts of nature. Because nature does not create evil, it creates balance. Mosasaurs hunted to survive. Ichthyosaurs swam to continue life. Everything within ancient oceans moved through endless cycles. Hunter and hunted, birth and disappearance. According to Jung, humans suffer when dividing existence into good and evil, beauty and terror. Nature does not divide the world that way. A creature can be dangerous, magnificent, frightening, and perfectly balanced within its ecosystem. Ancient oceans may have revealed this truth more clearly than anywhere else. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humans imagine gigantic marine reptiles gliding silently beneath primordial seas under ancient starlight, we are not merely thinking about prehistoric monsters, we are looking into the deepest part of life itself, an endless ocean where every creature, every memory, and every dream eventually dissolves into the vast, mysterious current of time. Part 26. The First Mammals. Perhaps one of the strangest truths in the history of life is that the creatures which eventually changed Earth's future began as something incredibly small, not rulers, giants, or beings whose footsteps shook the ground, but tiny creatures living quietly in darkness for millions of years during the age of dinosaurs, beneath the world of Tyrannosaurus rex, gigantic sauropods, and ancient predators. The first mammals already existed, small, fragile, living silently beneath the shadow of dinosaurs. And then, after an entire world collapsed, those tiny creatures eventually led to humanity itself. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, the human unconscious is deeply moved by stories of small things surviving darkness, because somewhere deep inside, humans too have felt small before the vastness of existence. Perhaps that is why the story of the first mammals feels so meaningful. It is not a story about power. It is a story about patience, adaptation, and quiet hope enduring through time. If we could travel back to the late Jurassic or Cretaceous and stand inside a primordial forest at night, the world would likely be filled with ancient sounds, insects, predators moving through darkness, and distant footsteps of gigantic creatures. And somewhere beneath damp leaves, a tiny animal no larger than a modern mouse would dart through shadows. That creature might have been a distant ancestor of mammals, It lived, quietly, cautiously, and almost invisibly, beneath the gigantic world surrounding it. There is something deeply lonely in that image. A tiny being surviving beneath the shadow of rulers of the earth. According to Jung, humans often believe strength belongs only to things that are large and visible. Yet nature repeatedly reveals the opposite. Sometimes, long survival depends not upon size or dominance, but upon flexibility, patience, and the ability to endure darkness. The earliest mammals were likely nocturnal. Daytime belonged to dinosaurs. Night became the place where mammals searched for food and avoided predators. This is fascinating, because life within darkness may have strengthened hearing, smell, and more adaptable brains. Perhaps many traits that make mammals unique today began during those ancient nights. If we imagine a prehistoric forest at midnight, the ground would likely be covered in mist and moisture. Far away, gigantic creatures would call through darkness. Moonlight would filter through towering trees, and then a tiny creature with bright reflective eyes would move quickly through shadows searching for insects, seeds, or scraps of food. No creature living then could have imagined that these small beings would someday transform the entire future of the planet. According to Jung, many important transformations within the human soul begin just as quietly. The greatest changes rarely emerge beneath bright light. They grow silently within darkness. Perhaps the first mammals were like invisible seeds of the future, while dinosaurs ruled through strength, to size, and power. Mammals survived through adaptability, flexibility, and the ability to wait. There is something deeply meaningful in that contrast. According to Jung, the human ego is often fascinated by power, but nature does not always choose the strongest creatures to inherit the future. Sometimes, it chooses the ones best able to adapt to change. And then the Chicxulub impact event arrived. The skies darkened, forests burned, food chains collapsed. The age of dinosaurs ended, but within the darkness that followed, those tiny mammals still survived. The symbolism of this feels almost overwhelming. When rulers vanished, the creatures once hidden in shadows slowly stepped into light. According to Jung, the human psyche also contains the shadow, forgotten or overlooked parts of ourselves. Yet sometimes, those hidden parts contain the greatest possibility for renewal. Mammals were once the shadow of the dinosaur age, less visible, less powerful, yet in the end, they endured. After the extinction, the world became strangely empty. Countless ecological roles disappeared, and mammals began to expand. From tiny nocturnal survivors, they gradually evolved into tree climbers, runners across plains, swimmers beneath oceans, and eventually creatures capable of reflecting upon their own existence, humans. There is something miraculous in that journey, because it means every human emotion, every dream, every thought began with tiny trembling creatures surviving darkness beneath dinosaurs. If we imagine those distant ancestors, perhaps they were simply trying to survive one more night, never knowing that. Tens of millions of years later, a creature called human would look at the stars and attempt to understand its own origins. According to Jung, humans endlessly search for where they came from, not merely to know history, but to understand why we carry within ourselves fear of darkness, the instinct to survive, and the longing for meaning. Perhaps many of those things were shaped long before humanity existed. During primordial nights, when early mammals learned to listen carefully to darkness in order to survive. One especially important difference was this: mammals developed deeper parental care, longer nurturing, stronger attachment, and eventually this led toward social emotion, communities, and more complex forms of connection. According to Jung, the capacity for love and emotional connection represents one of consciousness's greatest evolutions. Perhaps the first seeds of that transformation began beneath dinosaur feet. If we look deeply enough, the story of early mammals is not only evolutionary history, it is a story of hope. that small does not mean weak. Living in darkness does not mean meaningless. And sometimes the future of the world is carried by creatures nobody notices. According to Jung, many humans feel insignificant within a vast world. Yet nature offers a very gentle reminder. All great transformations begin from something small. A tiny creature beneath ancient darkness eventually became the origin of imagination, art, a love, and human consciousness. Perhaps that is one of the most beautiful stories ever written upon this planet. If we imagine one final night of the dinosaur age, while primordial forests still burned beneath ash-filled skies, perhaps somewhere beneath dark leaves, a tiny creature shivered softly from cold. It did not know. An entire age had just ended. Yet it continued breathing, continued surviving, continued moving through darkness, and eventually, life continued through it. There is something deeply comforting in that image, because it reminds us, even after the greatest endings, life quietly searches for ways to begin again. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when humans imagine a tiny creature surviving beneath pale moonlight in the age of dinosaurs, we are not only looking at distant ancestors, we are seeing a profound truth about life itself, that sometimes the most humble, fragile, and forgotten things become the hidden place where the future is quietly born. Part 27. Modern technology reconstructs dinosaurs. Perhaps one of the most extraordinary things about humanity is that even while standing tens of millions of years away from the past, we still try endlessly to look back. From fragments of bone buried in stone, humans want to know how dinosaurs walked, how they hunted, where they lived, and what ancient Earth truly looked like beneath primordial sunlight. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, humans do not live only in the present. We are constantly drawn toward memory, dreams, and lost worlds. Perhaps that is why modern dinosaur science feels almost meditative, because it is not merely fossil research. It is the human mind attempting to reconnect with Earth's deep time. If centuries ago scientists could only study bones, footprints, and scattered fossils, today modern technology has transformed how humans perceive ancient life. Computers can now simulate movement, running speed, posture, and even hunting behavior. This is astonishing, because, for the first time, dinosaurs are no longer motionless skeletons inside museums. They are beginning to move again. If we imagine a modern laboratory late at night, perhaps blue light from computer screens reflects across ancient fossils resting upon tables. A scientist quietly studies a three-dimensional reconstruction of a creature dead for tens of millions of years. On the screen, the skeleton begins moving, joints rotate, virtual muscles are rebuilt. An ancient body walks once more after unimaginable ages of silence. There is something deeply emotional about that image, as though humanity is trying to awaken Earth's sleeping memories. According to Jung, imagination is not escape from reality. It is a bridge between the visible and invisible. Perhaps modern technology is doing something similar, using data, mathematics, and science to reconstruct what human eyes never witnessed. One remarkable breakthrough is the ability to understand dinosaur movement. Long ago, humans imagined dinosaurs as slow, dragging heavy tails, and awkward. But modern simulations reveal something very different. Many species were likely fast, agile, and surprisingly balanced. Velociraptor may have moved like swift, intelligent hunters. Tyrannosaurus rex balanced its enormous body with astonishing efficiency while running. Perhaps the prehistoric world was far more alive than any film humanity has ever created. According to Jung, when an old image breaks apart, the mind opens toward something new. Dinosaurs are changing in exactly that way. They are no longer stone monsters. They are becoming living animals again, moving, hunting, and existing within vibrant ecosystems. If we imagine a computer simulation of a dinosaur herd crossing ancient plains, the experience would feel profoundly different from staring at museum skeletons. Dust rises beneath powerful feet. Muscles move rhythmically. Footsteps thunder across primordial ground. There is something almost magical in that moment, because technology is allowing humanity to see the past in entirely new ways. According to Jung, one of the deepest desires of the mind is turning the invisible into something visible. Humans paint, tell stories, create myths, and now use technology to resurrect lost worlds. Yet perhaps even more astonishing is chemistry itself. Today, scientists study not only fossil shapes, they analyze elements, isotopes, and microscopic chemical traces hidden within ancient bones. Through these traces, they begin understanding what dinosaurs ate, where they lived, and even how they migrated. This almost feels impossible. A fossilized bone, still preserving chemical memories of prehistoric Earth. According to Jung, the unconscious mind stores traces in a similar way. Experiences disappear from conscious awareness, yet leave deep marks within the psyche. Earth behaves similarly. Even after tens of millions of years, it still remembers. If we imagine a fossil sleeping within rock for ages beyond comprehension, perhaps it resembles a silent time capsule. Inside remain traces of ancient water, remnants of prehistoric plants once eaten, and records of migrations across landscapes that no longer exist. There is something sacred in this, because life never vanishes completely. It leaves memories within the very matter of the planet. According to Jung, every experience leaves an imprint upon the soul. Dinosaurs left imprints upon Earth in much the same way. Another fascinating discovery is this. Chemical analysis reveals that many dinosaurs traveled enormous distances during their lives. From minerals hidden inside teeth and bones, scientists can determine which waters animals drank from and how they moved across changing environments. This makes the ancient world feel vastly larger and more dynamic. Not creatures frozen permanently within one place, but living journeys, migrating, searching for water, and adapting to changing seasons. According to Jung, humans too are creatures of journeys. Perhaps that is why these discoveries move us so deeply, because when we observe ancient migration, we are also seeing ourselves, a species constantly searching for places where life can continue and flourish. If we look deeply enough, the true miracle is not merely how powerful technology has become, but that humans still care so deeply about understanding the past. Within a modern world filled with screens, machines, and artificial intelligence, we still devote decades studying ancient bones, fossilized footprints, and teeth buried beneath deserts. According to Jung, humans are not searching only for information. We are searching for meaning. Earth's past helps us understand how fragile life truly is, how vast time really is, and how small humanity remains within planetary history. Perhaps that is why dinosaur science feels both scientific and poetic at once, because it is a meeting place between data, imagination, and the ancient memory of life itself. If we imagine the future, perhaps technology will someday reconstruct prehistoric worlds in astonishing detail. One day humans may hear simulated sounds of Jurassic forests, see the true colors of ancient creatures, or walk through fully reconstructed prehistoric Earth. There is something beautiful about that longing, as though humanity is trying to touch time itself. According to Jung, humanity's collective memory constantly turns toward origins. Perhaps that is why, however modern we become, we still return to ancient questions. Where did we come from? What existed before us? What journeys did life travel to reach the present? Dinosaurs are only one part of those answers, yet they are the part that makes humans feel both tiny and miraculous. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, When modern screens illuminate three-dimensional reconstructions of creatures lost for tens of millions of years, humans are not merely using technology to rebuild the past. We are trying to hear Earth's distant echo, a planet still quietly preserving the memory of every life form that ever walked across it, waiting for one day to be remembered again through the curious and dreaming eyes of humanity. Part 28. The story is still not finished. Perhaps one of the most beautiful things about the history of dinosaurs is that even after hundreds of years of study, their story is still not truly finished. Every year, somewhere in the world, in dry deserts, beneath ancient cliffs, or deep under layers of earth silent for millions of years, a new fossil is discovered. A tooth, a footprint, an almost complete skeleton, and sometimes just one small discovery is enough to completely change how humanity understands the ancient world. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, the human mind longs for completeness. We want to understand everything, explain every mystery, and believe we have finally reached ultimate truth. But nature rarely gives humanity a completely finished answer. Perhaps that is what makes the story of dinosaurs so beautiful. Because the more we discover, the more we realize how little we truly know. If we imagine an early morning in an ancient desert, a gentle wind moves across red stone, sleeping for tens of millions of years. A paleontologist kneels near the ground. At first, there is only a strange shape hidden among rocks. Then slowly, dust is brushed away. A fragment of bone appears. Then, vertebrae, claws, and finally the traces of a creature no human has ever seen before. There is something almost sacred about that moment, as though the past is opening its eyes again after an impossibly long sleep. According to Jung, the unconscious mind resembles an ancient landscape. Beneath the surface of awareness, there still exist memories, symbols, and undiscovered parts of ourselves. Perhaps fossil excavation moves people so deeply because it mirrors the journey of self-discovery itself. We dig into Earth, just as we dig into the hidden layers of our own mind. The extraordinary thing is this: every new discovery can rewrite the old story. There was a time when humanity believed dinosaurs were slow, smooth-skinned like modern reptiles, and almost incapable of complex behavior. But then new fossils appeared. Feathers were discovered. Evidence of parental care emerged. Ancient colors began to be reconstructed from fossilized melanosomes. And suddenly, the dinosaur world transformed before human eyes. According to Jung, psychological growth begins when we accept that old beliefs may not be completely true. That requires immense humility. And perhaps science is most beautiful precisely because of that. It is not afraid to change. It is willing to say, we were wrong before. Perhaps that is one of humanity's most beautiful qualities, the ability to continue learning, even when new truths destroy familiar ideas. If we look back at the history of dinosaur research, almost every generation has had to redraw the prehistoric world in a new way. A single fossil can transform evolutionary trees, theories about movement, and even humanity's understanding of life on Earth. That is why dinosaur history does not feel like a finished book. It feels like a story still being written. According to Jung, human life works the same way. We often try to define ourselves through old memories, old roles, and old definitions of who we are. But humans are always changing. Just as science changes whenever new discoveries appear, perhaps that is why searching for fossils feels profoundly human, because deep inside, everyone is trying to understand who they are, where they came from, and what the true story of life really is. One especially beautiful thing is this: many of the greatest discoveries come from the quietest places, not brightly lit laboratories, but silent deserts, empty stone mountains, or frozen, windswept lands. Sometimes a skeleton waits beneath the earth for millions of years before being found. According to Jung, the unconscious mind also contains sleeping parts like that, memories and hidden potentials waiting quietly beneath the surface. And sometimes, one moment is enough for them to emerge and completely transform how we understand ourselves. Fossils work the same way. A small discovery can force the entire scientific world to rethink everything. There is something poetic about that, because it reminds us. Truth is not a frozen stone statue. It lives. It changes. It expands alongside human understanding. If we imagine Earth tens of millions of years ago, perhaps countless creatures once existed that humanity still knows nothing about. Some may have carried colors nobody has imagined, made sounds never heard again, or behaved in ways beyond all current theories. This makes the world feel infinitely larger. According to Jung, mystery is essential for the human soul, because when people believe they fully understand everything, imagination begins to die. Dinosaurs remain fascinating today because they are still mysterious. There are still empty spaces, unanswered questions, and secrets sleeping deep within ancient stone. Perhaps that is why this story never truly ends. Even now, somewhere on Earth, wind is eroding ancient rock, ice is melting in polar regions, or rain is exposing fossils unseen for millions of years. Earth is still continuing its story. According to Jung, the past is not completely behind us. It still lives within memory, symbols, and the hidden foundations of the present. Dinosaurs are the same. Though they vanished tens of millions of years ago, they still remain present. In modern birds, in human imagination, and in the endless curiosity of science, if we look deeply enough, perhaps the most beautiful thing is not how many fossils humanity has discovered, but that we continue searching, because that journey reveals something important about humans. We are creatures who never stop asking questions. Perhaps that is what truly makes humanity unique. Not merely living, but wanting to understand the meaning of life itself. According to Jung, the human soul is always drawn toward the unknown, not to control it, but to feel connected to something greater than itself. Perhaps dinosaur history gives us exactly that feeling. When we look at ancient fossils, we do not only see lost creatures, we see deep time, the fragility of every age, and the unimaginably long journey of life before humans ever existed. That realization makes us feel both tiny and strangely miraculous. If we imagine the future, perhaps hundreds of years from now, humanity will still be digging into Earth. New fossils will emerge, old theories will change, and every generation will retell the dinosaur story differently. There is something peaceful in that thought, because it reminds us, knowledge is not a final destination. It is a journey that never truly ends. And perhaps, during the quietest nights, when imagining an ancient skeleton sleeping beneath stone for millions of years, waiting for gentle human hands to uncover it, we are not only thinking about dinosaurs, we are thinking about the nature of humanity itself. A tiny species within a vast universe, still listening to echoes of the past, still searching for meaning inside the darkness of time, and still softly believing that somewhere beneath silent Earth, untold stories are waiting to awaken. And then, after all the journeys we have traveled together tonight, from the mist-covered primordial forests of the Jurassic, the ancient oceans where giant creatures silently swam through darkness, to the skies where pterosaurs once spread their wings beneath the sunset of young Earth. Perhaps the most extraordinary thing was never the size of dinosaurs, but time itself, a span of time so enormous that the human mind can barely truly comprehend it. Hundreds of millions of years before there were cities, language, or any memory of humanity, Earth already carried entirely different worlds. Worlds with different sounds, different skies, and different rhythms of life. From the perspective of Carl Gustav Jung, humans often imagine themselves at the center of history. But when we look into the age of dinosaurs, we begin to understand we are only a very small moment inside the planet's long dream. And strangely, that realization does not make life meaningless. It makes existence feel even more miraculous. Because within this vast universe and endless time, humans can still look at fossils, imagine lost worlds, and feel their hearts moved by creatures they have never seen. Perhaps that is one of the most beautiful things about the human mind. We do not live only in the present. We can dream about the past, reflect on the future, and connect with things separated from us by tens of millions of years. If we look deeply enough, the story of dinosaurs is not only a story about extinction, it is a story about change, adaptation, and the continuation of life. Because after the giants disappeared, life continued. Small creatures living in darkness evolved into mammals, and eventually into humans. Which means every thought you are having right now, every dream, every memory, and even this quiet moment listening before sleep, is part of a journey stretching across hundreds of millions of years. According to Jung, every human carries within them the collective memory of life itself. Perhaps that is why hearing about primordial forests, ancient oceans, and dinosaur skies creates such a strange feeling of familiarity, as though somewhere deep within the mind, something still remembers those ancient worlds. Perhaps that is why nature always brings humans peace. The sound of rain, wind through trees, ocean waves, all of them are far older than humanity itself. And perhaps our bodies still recognize those sounds as part of a primordial home that existed long before modern civilization. After all, dinosaurs never truly disappeared completely. Part of them still lives. In birds crossing today's sky, in fossils sleeping beneath Earth, and in the imagination of humanity that never stops dreaming. There is something very gentle in that thought, that nothing ever fully disappears. Life simply changes form, changes rhythm, and continues its journey in new ways. According to Jung, maturity is not becoming a completely different person. It is learning to reconnect with the deepest parts of oneself. Perhaps exploring Earth's ancient past is similar. When we look into planetary history, we are also looking more deeply into our own souls. Fear, curiosity, smallness, and the longing to find meaning within a vast universe. If we imagine Earth on an ancient night, tens of millions of years ago, perhaps the sky was already filled with stars just like tonight. Gigantic creatures sleeping within primordial forests. Ancient oceans moving quietly beneath moonlight. Wind crossing landscapes untouched by human footsteps. And then, time continued moving. Ages changed. Species appeared and vanished. Until one day, a small creature sat quietly before a glowing screen, listening to stories of lost worlds before drifting into sleep. Perhaps that is the most beautiful thing about life itself. Everything is connected through time. Dinosaurs, ancient forests, modern birds, and humanity. We are not separate from nature. We are part of the long story Earth has been telling for billions of years. And perhaps, after everything you have heard tonight, as the room grows quieter, your eyes heavier, and your thoughts slower, you no longer need to understand anything else. Simply feel that. Somewhere, very deep inside, you still belong to this ancient planet. You belong to rain, night wind, starlit skies, and the slow breathing rhythm of time itself. Thank you for joining this journey through the world of dinosaurs and the hidden mysteries of ancient Earth. If you enjoyed gentle, thoughtful, and emotionally rich stories like these, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring together the human mind, nature, history, and the quietest mysteries of life through the reflective perspective of Carl Gustav Jung. And now, let every sound slowly drift farther away. Let your body soften. Let your mind float slowly like the ancient flow of planetary time. May you have a very deep sleep, a peaceful sleep, and a gentle sleep beneath the night sky of an Earth that has been dreaming for billions of years.